Chapter 351. The princes and princesses were eating noisily, which annoyed Li Yi, but he couldn't reprimand them. Li Yi cleaned his hands and walked out to the courtyard. A trace of doubt emerged in his mind. Did the old emperor really ask him to come to the palace just to make him cook? At this moment, the eunuch stepped forward and said with a smile, "County Li, the morning court has ended. Follow me to see His Majesty." Sure enough, although he was very free, the emperor should not be so free. Li Yi also wanted to see what the old emperor had up his sleeve. The effeminate eunuch took out a token from his sleeve and handed it to Li Yi, saying, "County Li, keep this token. It is the proof of entering the palace. With it, you can enter and leave the palace freely." Li Yi took the shining token and felt it sink in his hand. He couldn't help but think, this thing is actually made of gold? No wonder the royal family is so generous. A token is made of pure gold. If I have a few more, won't I become rich? At this moment, most of his attention was on the golden token, and he didn't notice that the eunuch beside him bowed even more when he saw the golden token. The security in the palace was really tight. The eunuch's name, identity, and physical characteristics were engraved clearly on the token. The possibility of it being a fake was too small. After putting away the token, Li Yi turned around and saw the eunuch's flattering smile. He frowned and opened his mouth to say something, only to remember that he didn't know the eunuch's name. "What's your name?" The eunuch smiled and said, "Lord Ju, you can call me Wei Zhong." Wei Zhong. Li Yi was stunned and blurted out, "Who is Wei Zhongxian to you?" The eunuch looked puzzled, then shook his head and said, "Wei Zhongxian. I've never heard of him." Li found it funny. Even if they were in the same time and space, there was a difference of hundreds or thousands of years. Moreover, they were in different worlds. How could there be any connection? "Wei Zhong. What are your orders, Lord Ju?" Li Yi looked at the eunuch's feminine smile and couldn't help but shiver. He had goosebumps and said, "Don't smile in front of me in the future." Wei Zhong was speechless. The imperial palace was really huge. There were all kinds of palaces that Li Yi had never even heard of before. There were countless arches and corridors. If it wasn't for Wei Zhong leading the way, he would definitely get lost. After walking for about a quarter of an hour, his field of vision suddenly widened. The occasion to meet the old emperor was not grand at all. It was not even in the palace or the study. He walked into a garden full of evergreen trees, walked past two groups of imperial bodyguards with stern faces, and went up to a pavilion. Then he saw Emperor Jing in a yellow robe. Compared to when he was in Ningguang Fu, Jingdi's complexion was worse, but there were more smiles on his face. He was obviously in a good mood. The county magistrate of Chang, and Li Yi, greets your majesty. Seeing these emperors and imperial concubines, there was one thing that was particularly bad. They often had to kneel down. The bluestone slabs in the pavilion were expensive and uncomfortable. Fortunately, Li Yi's knees only touched it slightly. Emperor Jing waved his hand and said, "No need to be so polite. Get up." Emperor Jing was a kind person. Although he was the ruler of a country, at least in Li Yi's view, he didn't give people too much pressure when facing him. Emperor Jing sat on a stone stool covered with a cushion. He pointed to the seat opposite him and said, "Sit. There must be something wrong with this abnormal situation. The ruler of a country should have some majesty." Being so polite, Li Yi was really not used to it. Could it be that as soon as he sat down, a group of imperial guards jumped out from the side, pulled out their swords, and pointed at him to punish him for being disrespectful? Emperor Jing looked at him and said with a smile, "Why? Scholarly who dared to say fart in front of me, doesn't even dare to sit now?" Li Yi thought in his heart, if he had known that he was the emperor of the Jing kingdom, he would have run away as far as possible. He wouldn't have invited him to eat that piece of pastry in the spirit of sharing, and today's matter wouldn't have happened. It was all that piece of pastry's fault. "Thank you, your majesty." Since the old emperor said so, Li Yi had to sit down. The scene in front of him was very familiar. It seemed that when the two of them met, it was also in such an environment. Everything that happened today originated from the secret garden in Prince Ning's mansion, from that piece of sinful pastry. Seeing Li Yi sit down, Emperor Jing pointed to the table in front of Li Yi and said, Try this white fungus and lotus seed porridge. See how the imperial chefs in the palace compare to Prince Ning's mansion. Li Yi's heart was beating like a drum. This was not right. Were all the emperors in the feudal society like this? Did he summon him to the palace this time just to treat him to a meal? As the saying goes, being in the king's company is like being with a tiger. Shouldn't the emperors kill the whole family and execute 9 generations if they don't like it? Who is this kind of enthusiastic and hospitable uncle next door? He looked down at the food on the table. The fragrance assailed his nostrils. If he hadn't been full just now, he would have had a big appetite. But the problem was that he had eaten so much just now, he couldn't eat any more. Wei Zhong, who was standing outside the pavilion, lowered his head, but his attention was always on the pavilion. At this moment his face was pale, and his legs and stomach were trembling. He racked his brain to recall if he had offended Li Xianzi in any way today. If he had, he would risk his life to save it. Yes, Li Xianzi didn't seem to like him smiling. In the future, he couldn't smile in front of him even if he died. The emperor was a temperamental animal. Who knew if he would turn hostile in the next moment even if he was smiling now? Li Yi had to pick up the white fungus lotus seed porridge in front of him, and took a sip. The porridge was delicious, really delicious. But he had just drunk most of the white fungus lotus seed soup from Her Royal Highness, and eaten a plate of egg fried rice. No matter how delicious the porridge was, he couldn't drink it anymore. Not to mention, white fungus lotus seed porridge. How is it? Jing Emperor asked with a smile. The heat is just right. Li felt bitter in his heart, but he still had to keep a smile on his face. Jing Emperor seemed to be in a good mood. He picked up the chopsticks and ate. He drank 2 bowls of porridge in a row, which stunned Li Yi on the opposite side. The old man standing behind Jing Emperor showed a smile on his face. At this time, the emperor didn't have any burden on his shoulders, just like that time in Prince Ning mansion. The horseshoes, the divine punishment, and the words he unintentionally said were all deeply in the emperor's heart. The boy on the opposite side was really a guy who was good at creating miracles. The emperor once said, Li Yi alone is worth thousands of troops and horses. This sentence seemed to be exaggerated, but everything he did was seen by Changda. He was like a lucky star who could always solve the emperor's problems in time. Especially in this battle of defending the border, it was the biggest achievement the emperor had made since he was on the throne. In the secret letter, General Su Dingyuan praised the divine punishment very much and almost attributed all the military achievements to the divine punishment. The emperor's prestige in the imperial court reached the peak of more than 10 years. The local magnates who had been restless also settled down. The envoys of the Qi kingdom were already on the way. This was the first time in decades that the Jing kingdom had taken the initiative in the struggle with the Qi kingdom. It would be recorded in history forever. Chapter 352. Accompany me to eat. Accompany me to drink. Accompany me to sleep. Of the 3 companions, Li Yi was only the first. As the ruler of a country, he could ask anyone to eat with him with just a word. Why did he choose him? Li Yi was already very full, but he still had to force himself to finish the white fungus and lotus seed porridge in front of him. He picked up some food with his chopsticks. Fortunately, the old emperor had not eaten his fill in the morning, and seemed to have a good appetite. Most of the food on the table went into his stomach. After a while, it seemed that he was finally full. Emperor Jing put down his chopsticks, and the eunuch standing to the side quickly handed him a yellow silk handkerchief. Emperor Jing used it to wipe his mouth and suddenly asked, Do you have any dissatisfaction with me for letting you come to the capital from Qing and prefecture? I am indebted to your majesty to be made the magistrate of Chang'an County. It is a matter that brings honor to the family. I am not dissatisfied. Even if he was dissatisfied, he could not say it so bluntly. The old emperor's question was basically a useless question. Of course, this sentence could only be thought by Li Yi. I know that you are lazy and unwilling to participate in the disputes of the court. I promise you that I will not involve you. Thus, I will only give you the title of nobility and not increase your rank. Emperor Jing stood up and said, This is the land of the Jing kingdom. What is the difference between Qing and Nanjingdo? You are a rare pillar of talent. Everything you have done in the past 6 months has not solved my urgent needs. If you cannot be used by the country, it would be a great regret. Li Yi was a little ashamed. Compared to others, he lacked national pride and national honor. But this could not be blamed on him. His soul came from another world. He was not a citizen of the Jing kingdom. Even though he had integrated into the current society and accepted it, the deep-rooted things in his bones could not be easily changed. Moreover, the difference between a person's strength and the resistance he might face was too great. There is no suitable position for you in the imperial court, but if you are left idle at home, it will be a waste of talent. I believe that you do not want to be idle. When Emperor Jing walked out of the pavilion, Li Yi could only follow. After a pause, he said, "The Directorate of Imperial Academy has a high opinion of the new algorithm. Since you are quite accomplished in mathematics, why don't you go to the palace and teach the princesses and princes about mathematics? They always complain that the lessons taught by teacher are obscure and difficult to understand. You should have a better way." Li Yi really wanted to say that he was very willing to do nothing. He could just be a parasite in the country. What was the point of teaching mathematics? His students were either princesses or princes. It would definitely not be easy to discipline them. Why did he have to make things difficult for himself? However, the old emperor was obviously announcing the truth and not asking for his opinion. No matter how unwilling he was, he could only keep his opinion to himself. The princess and the princes are still young, and they are stubborn and mischievous. It's not easy to discipline them. Just treat them as students, and when the time comes, do as you please. Do as I please? These words could be interpreted in any way. Coming from the mouth of the emperor, it meant that Li Yi, as a mathematics teacher, had a lot of authority. If any prince disobeyed him, he could punish him by standing and slapping his palms. These were all do as I please. Standing with the emperor was a very stressful thing, even though he was very approachable and did not put on airs like an emperor. Fortunately, the old emperor was very busy and did not have so much time to waste here with him. Maybe he only took out a part of his lunchtime. Being a teacher for the princes and princesses was something that Li Yi did not expect. However, he only needed to teach them 5 times a month, and each time was only for 2 hours. The working conditions were quite good. For Li Yi, who had rich work experience, it was not that difficult to accept. Of course, this time it was not for free, and he was paid. County Magistrate Li Yi, let me see you out of the palace. Wei Zhong expressionlessly led the way for Li Yi with a straight face. Li Yi did not understand why the man, who had been smiling just now, suddenly had such an expression. Finally, when they were about to walk out of the palace, he could not help but ask, "Eunuch Wei, you have been wearing a straight face all the way here. Do you have a problem with me?" Wei Zhong's body trembled when he heard this, and his face revealed a terrified expression. He said, "County Magistrate Li, didn't you tell me not to smile in front of you?" The poor eunuch was about to cry in his heart. When had he ever met such a difficult person to please? He could not smile, but he could not smile either. In front of him, he had to be more careful than in front of the emperor. Li Yi was stunned for a moment. He just said it casually. He didn't expect this guy to take it seriously. He waved his hand and said, "Forget it. I was just saying. Don't take it seriously. Laugh if you want." Although he did not look good when he smiled, it was much better than wearing a straight face, as if he would stab people in the back at any time. When he entered the palace, he was carried in a sedan chair, but he had to walk back by himself. Wei Zhong had wanted to call a sedan chair for Li Yi at the gate of the palace, but Li Yi refused. Touching his swollen belly, Li Yi felt that it was better for him to walk back. This time he had gained something from entering the palace. He was suddenly conferred a title of nobility and granted land without saying anything else. He had always felt a little uneasy in his heart. Now the worries in his heart were gone. He just had to go to the palace every few days and resume his old business. At the same time, he could catch up with Her Highness, talk about business cooperation, and freeload on the food in the palace. His life was quite happy, and when he walked into the gate of the Li family to digest the food, and bumped into a man who was coming toward him, his life reached the peak of happiness. An extremely surprised expression appeared on Li Yi's face. He asked, Feng, why are you here? Have Rui and Xiaohuan arrived? Feng was also surprised. The next moment, he gave Li Yi a big bear hug and patted him hard on the shoulder. When Li Yi was almost out of breath, he let go of him and said with a grin, Yes, we just arrived in the capital. If it hadn't been for the rain, we would have arrived a few days ago. By the way, why are you here? Where are Rui and Xiaohuan now? It's such a long way. I was worried about Miss and Xiaohuan coming to the capital, so I followed them. If something really happened, it would be more convenient for a man to help. Feng said with a silly smile. We just arrived not long ago. Madam is talking to Miss. If little aunt hadn't told him yesterday, Li still wouldn't have known that the old madam had also brought them here. At this moment, he couldn't hide the excitement in his heart. Led by a servant of the Li family, he quickly walked towards the old madam's residence. Son-in-law. Just after passing through a moon door, a thin figure trotted over from the front. Li reached out and caught the little servant girl who rushed over. Inside the room, a familiar figure came out. Chapter 353. He rubbed Xiaohuan's head out of habit. It had only been half a month, but the familiar action felt a little rusty. The most caring person was his maid. Just looking at her made him feel happy. Li carried her up and spun her around. The maid was so shy that she couldn't even lift her head. He pinched her little face and asked, Did you not eat well these days? How did you lose so much weight? Really? The maidservant's eyes curved into crescent moons, and 2 shallow dimples appeared on her face. She had some baby fat, and always hoped to become as thin as Miss and Second Mississippi. She wanted to have the sharp chin that the son-in-law liked. Really? He stretched out his finger and tapped on her forehead. He looked up at the woman who was walking towards them. The two looked at each other and smiled. There were thousands of words that they wanted to say. Ear is back. The old mistress walked out with a smile and said, Why are you standing outside? Come in quickly. As she spoke, her eyes did not move away from Rui. Obviously, the old mistress was very satisfied with this granddaughter-in-law. Li saw a hairpin that he had never seen before on Rui's head. It was not new either. It was very likely that it was a gift from the old mistress. It was the old mistress's habit to give gifts whenever there was a disagreement. Anything valuable would be given. This was the old mistress's way of expressing her love. Son-in-law, did you really become a viscount? As the old mistress held Rui's hand and spoke, Feng sat next to Li Yi and asked mysteriously. Li Yi casually threw the waist token to him. Feng looked at it again and again, but could not figure out anything. Although he was illiterate, he believed what the son-in-law said. Life was really unpredictable. Half a year ago, he was a poor scholar that he personally kidnapped up the mountain. In a blink of an eye, he had become a noble in the capital. When he thought back, he felt a little sad. Don't go back to the capital this time. Has been conferred a noble title by His Majesty, and will soon settle down here. The two of you should think about having children. The old mistress brought up the past again. She couldn't wait to have a great-grandson the next day. Rui blushed. After Madame Dowager finished speaking, she ordered a maid to open a small box on the table. She took out all the bracelets and hairpins and tried them one by one in the courtyard. A few maids gathered together and whispered to each other. From time to time, they would poke their heads out to look inside. I heard that young master's wife is here. What do you mean by heard? He's talking to the old madam inside right now. Young master is a man of striking appearance. I wonder what young master's wife looks like. That goes without saying. Just look at the Second Mississippi. How bad can the two sisters be? I saw it just now. Young master's wife and young master are a good match. Unfortunately, we won't have the chance. Since Madame Dowager's birthday banquet last night, young master, who had just returned to the Li family, became an influential figure in the Li family again. It was said that because of young master, Prince Ning's son and Princess Yongla both sent people to congratulate Madame Dowager. Master Sandalwood from the Cold Mountain Temple even came in person and presented gifts. Many people said that young master's handwriting was better than Zhao Chun's. They didn't know who Zhao Chun was. but they knew that young master was much better than they thought. Of course, the most shocking thing was that His Majesty conferred a Viscount title on young master, which was the same as the old master. However, young master was still so young. Li couldn't live in his Viscount mansion today. Although he wanted to, according to the rules, he had to wait until someone from the palace came to inform him. In the afternoon, he brought Rui to meet his grandma's family. They didn't know that he had become a Viscount yet. After living in the capital for decades, he suddenly had to leave. Of course, he couldn't say that he didn't feel sad. The old man didn't seem to care whether he left or not. He just held Rui's hands tightly, choking with sobs and unable to say a word. Lies couldn't be kept for long. Every time he avoided a certain question, the old man seemed to realize something. He became silent more and more often. At night, they returned to the Li family. The four of them stayed in the small yard, which finally looked like a home again. The little maid obviously had a lot to say. After she opened her mouth, she didn't stop talking. Most of the things that happened in Qing and Prefecture in the half a month after Li left. In the top courtesan competition of the Lantern Festival, Lu Qiaoqiao finally won first place. However, the most famous one was Zheng Zimo, the former top courtesan of the Jade Yard. A gifted scholar with the same name as the son-in-law wrote many poems for her. Many people offered sky-high prices just to see her. However, she had already redeemed herself and disappeared in Qing and Prefecture. The goddess of Luo Shui became a legend. This matter was probably the entertainment headline of Qing and Prefecture during this time. Even Xiaohuan had heard of it. Of course, what interested her most was the gifted scholar with the same name as the son-in-law. Li was very surprised that Zheng Zimo had redeemed herself for him. However, thinking about it this way, all her actions had a reasonable explanation. That was before the top courtesan competition. She had already planned to redeem herself. She didn't want to increase her fame at all, because the price of redeeming herself would be higher. Li was a little embarrassed. He had good intentions, but he almost ruined her big event. Li felt that she must have scolded him a lot behind his back. However, she had actually left Qing and Prefecture. The chance of seeing her again in the future was very slim. Thinking of this, an inexplicable sense of loss appeared in Li Yi's heart. The young servant girl continued, "Also, that old storyteller gave a lot of money to our family." Old Sun's dream of opening theaters all over the world had progressed to an unknown stage. Before he left, he had told him not to be too eager to expand. Steady progress was the best way. In the future, it wouldn't be convenient for him to write scripts. On a whim, he wanted to develop a similar entertainment industry in this world. However, this plan had been disrupted by this trip to the capital. He would leave all of this to old Sunday. The old man was in good spirits. It looked like he could still struggle for many years. As for what would develop in the end, he would have to wait and see. The business of Qing and Prefecture had to be managed by someone he could trust. If the business in the capital started, no matter if it was the partnership with Ning Wangfu with Rui Nectar, hard liquor, or the brothel, they would all seem less important. It would be better to invest them all in other areas. Perhaps he would have to personally go back once for this matter. Most of the things that Xiao Huan said were actually related to him. As for the change of prefect in Qing and Prefecture and the issuance of some new government decrees, these things didn't seem so important. There was one thing that was very important. Last time he had been delayed because he had rushed to the capital. This time, no reason could be an obstacle. The journey was tiring for the young servant girl. As Xiaohuan spoke, she leaned on his arm and fell asleep. Li carefully lifted her up and placed her on the bed in the room. He covered her with the blanket and closed the door to leave. He was prepared to complete the unfinished big event in his life. When he walked into the courtyard, he happened to see Rui being pulled back into her room by Mississippi Lu. She said that the sisters hadn't seen each other for half a month and had a lot to talk about. It was normal for sisters to have deep feelings. Li gritted his teeth and glared fiercely at the courtyard next door. He made up his mind. The money he owed to Mississippi Lu, he wouldn't return it even if he was beaten to death. Chapter 354. Dukechen Residence. Li Minghan has passed away. The grudge between the Chun and Li family ends here. In the future, do not act against the Li family or target Li Mingzi, and do not use the Chun family's resources in court. The eldest son of the current Duke Chun, and the true leader of the Chun family, Chun Qing, spoke to his gloomy-faced younger brother, Chun Chong, the county magistrate of Chong and Li Minggen's son. Hearing the news, Chun Chong's gloomy face was still filled with disbelief. Then a trace of anger appeared. It's just a county magistrate. Why should our Chun family be afraid of him? If only things were so simple, Chun Qing said gravely. But this is the first instance of His Majesty conferring a noble title in recent years, leaping from a commoner to a noble in the capital. I heard that on the day of the Li family's matriarch's birthday banquet, Prince Ning and Princess Yongla both sent congratulatory gifts. Do you really think that there is no connection between these matters? The Chun family's decades of glory had relied on the emperor's grace. In reality, whether it was the marquis or the dukes, which noble family in the capital was not like this? Whether it was glory or poverty, it all depended on the decision of the imperial family. For the Chun family, a county magistrate or even a marquis was nothing, but they could not ignore the thoughts of the emperor. A county magistrate conferred a title was not just a small viscount. For His Majesty to ignore the objections of the court officials, how important must he be in His Majesty's heart? It was not worth the emperor's displeasure for a little personal grudge. I understand. Chun Chong clenched his fists and could only sigh helplessly. The grudge with the Li family was a personal grudge. If it negatively affected the entire Chun family because of a personal grudge, he would become a sinner of the family. Walking out of the room, Chun Chong let out a long sigh. A deep sense of helplessness surged from the bottom of his heart. When he saw the woman sitting in the garden, the helplessness on his face immediately disappeared and turned into a smile. He slowly walked over and said, "In a few days when the weather is good, let's go out for a walk. If you stay in the residence for too long, you will probably feel suffocated." The woman had a head of white hair and looked to be in her early 30s. She was originally staring ahead in a daze, but when she heard this, she returned to her senses. A faint smile appeared on her face as she said, "It's been more than 10 years. It's indeed a bit depressing. It's good to listen to second brother." Hearing this, a hint of joy appeared on Chun Chong's face. "I will arrange it immediately." The woman nodded with a smile, but the light in her eyes was still a little lacking. The sudden appearance of a noble was something that all the influential families in the capital had to pay attention to. It was especially so when they found out that they knew nothing about the county magistrate of Chong, and it was as if he had appeared out of thin air and suddenly gained the favor of the emperor. Everyone was shocked and surprised. The officials in the court were naturally opposed to this. Almost all the nobles in the capital had obtained their titles during the founding of the country. From then on, it was harder than ascending to the heavens to be conferred a title. Many old officials had worked hard their whole lives and still could not obtain such a special honor. Prestige was only for one generation, and could not be passed on to the children and grandchildren. How could a young man with no contributions be conferred a title? The emperor's action would chill the hearts of many officials in the court. However, everyone's opposition was suppressed by the emperor. A few of the big shots in the court also chose to remain silent. Even the censors did not submit a memorial, which made everyone feel that something was wrong. The emperor would not confer a title for no reason. The only possibility was that the county magistrate of Chong and had made enough contributions to be conferred a title. At such a young age, he had accomplished something that many old officials could not do in their entire lives. There was no way to verify this, and the emperor would not explain it in detail to them. It seemed that they could not get any useful information from the county magistrate of Chong, and this was because the county magistrate was not like the other nobles. After being conferred a title, he did not invite other nobles, nor did he hold any banquets. He was so low-key that it made people's hair stand on end. The only thing they knew was that he was the eldest grandson of the Li family, and the family of Assistant Minister Li of the Ministry of Personnel. That was all. Li Xianzi, who was in the eye of the storm, had no time to care about this. He had just moved into his new home today. The county magistrate's mansion was actually not far from the capital city. Although one could not see the city wall from the doorstep, it could be considered as within the second ring road of the capital city. According to the eunuch who led the way, the mansion had just been built by the emperor's order by the Ministry of Works. It could not be more new. The conferment of a title was not just a title. The Viscount's mansion, fief, tenants, maids, servants, and even guards were all included in the conferment package. Not long after they left the capital city, they entered the territory of Chang and County. After walking along the official road for less than an hour, a magnificent mansion could be seen from afar. A group of maids and servants stood in 2 rows. When the crowd approached, they immediately bowed and said respectfully, "Welcome back, sir." Xiao Huan was startled. She grabbed Li Yi's sleeve and looked at these people curiously. Even when Li Yi was the county magistrate, she had never seen such a grand scene. Feng stood there in a daze and looked at the scene in front of him with envy. Hordes of maids, beautiful wives and concubines, and a large mansion. Wasn't this the life he dreamed of? The little girl Duan Wu also held her mother's hand tightly and looked at the gate of the Viscount's mansion with timid eyes. This was the place where they would live in the future. They would no longer have to squeeze on a small bed with their grandmother and mother. Would she have a room of her own? The woman named He Xiu, whose hand was held by the little girl, also had a look of realization on her face. A few days ago, they were bullied on the street. The whole family was squeezed into a small room. In the blink of an eye, they lived in a big mansion with maids and servants. All of this made her feel like she was in a dream. Beside her, a man in his 40s was rubbing his hands nervously, but his face was full of excitement. There were no houses within 500 feet of the Viscount's mansion. However, there were people looking around carefully from a distance. They had long heard that the manor had welcomed a new owner, who was a Viscount personally conferred by His Majesty. All the villagers craned their necks to see what the Viscount looked like. "Let's go in first." Li Yi waved his hand and led the way into the new house. The servants also swarmed in and stood neatly in the yard. Looking at the group of servants standing respectfully in the yard, Li Yi was still a little unaccustomed to it. From now on, everything, including their life and death, was in his hands. It turned out that this was the life of a noble. No wonder so many people wanted to be conferred the title of king or minister. The word power could indeed bring people different experiences. Chapter 355. Open your eyes wide and look carefully. In front of you are the masters of the Li family. This is the Marquis of Chang'an County, personally appointed by His Majesty. This is his wife, and this is the second miss. Uncle Li stood in front of the servants and said loudly. Now there were dozens of people in the Viscount's mansion. Naturally, it was different from before. All kinds of daily affairs needed to be taken care of. Of course, these things could not all be handed over to Li Yi or Rui. Of course, a housekeeper was indispensable. Madame Dowager specially asked Uncle Li to help her manage these affairs. That was to say, from now on, Uncle Li was the housekeeper of the Viscount's mansion. There are only so many masters in the mansion. You must be respectful and not disrespectful. Except for the maids, no one is allowed to enter or leave the inner residence. It was the first time that the servants of the Li family met their masters and listened to the housekeeper's words. They stood respectfully in the same place and secretly remembered everyone's faces. They were perturbed. They did not know what the temperament of this lord was like, and whether he was easy to get along with. What was the temper of Madame Dowager? She might have to serve him carefully these days. They were all registered as slaves and were the property of the Viscount's mansion. If they accidentally violated the taboo of their masters, no one would speak up for them even if they were drowned in a well. All right, all of you go and do your own things. There are not many people in the house. Just do what you should do on a daily basis. Li Yi waved his hand to the crowd of servants and said, Madame Dowager has poor eyesight. Pick 2 clever maids to serve Madame Dowager, and let the others do their own things. In addition, for the first time you meet, each servant will be rewarded with a sum of money from the accountant. There was a lack of manpower, so Uncle Li was both the housekeeper and the accountant. Many of the servants were delighted to hear this. This amount was already a month's salary for them in the Viscount's mansion. More importantly, Lord Ju was generous and seemed to be amiable, so he shouldn't be difficult to get along with. Their days in the future would probably be much easier. Even some of the pretty maids began to feel excited in their hearts. If their appearance could catch the Lord's eyes, they would really become a phoenix. Even if they could not become a concubine, their status would be great. However, when they saw the Lord's wife, second miss, and even their personal maids, they could not help but feel discouraged. With their appearance, they really could not compare. Besides, second miss actually carried a sword with her. If the consequences were too serious, all the maids would give up this unrealistic idea. When they came from Qing'an Prefecture, they traveled light and had almost no luggage. However, the Viscount's mansion had all the necessary furniture. If they really needed something, they could go out and buy it. When they came, they saw that the Viscount's Lord's mansion, Lord's mansion, Lord's mansion, Lord's mansion, Lord's mansion, Lord's mansion. Li Yi and Rui naturally had to choose a courtyard in the inner mansion. Duanwu, Xiao Yi, and Lord's mansion stayed together. Mississippi Lu chose another. Xiao Huan did not dare to live alone, so she stayed with her. Feng and uncle lived in the outer mansion. As the mistress, Rui was taken by two maids to familiarize herself with the Viscount's mansion. Xiao Huan also followed. Mississippi Lu was tidying up her own room. Li Yi sat on the stone bench in the courtyard. The maids and servants who passed by had to salute him respectfully. All of them were proof that this place would belong to him in the future. Imagine, the sunlight was slightly intoxicating, the weather was beautiful, leisurely lying in the courtyard and basking in the sun. The two pretty maids on the left and right massaged his arms and legs. Then there was a talented maid who sang and danced. When he was tired of watching ordinary dances, he asked Miss Lu Er to perform a sword dance. With this life, what more could he ask for? Half a year ago, he was still hiding in the mountains, drinking porridge and stealing chickens. Now he had crossed the threshold of being well off. He lived in the most prosperous city with a group of maids and servants. He officially lived the luxurious life of a feudal aristocrat. Young master, are we not going back to Qing'an Mansion in the future? Feng asked with a confused face. Li felt that he had fallen. He was actually thinking about whether there was a big mansion with maids and servants in Qing'an Mansion. It seemed that it was easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but difficult to go from extravagance to frugality. He had not even started to enjoy, but he had already forgotten the hard life before. Anyway, it's not too far. If your wife agrees, you can come to the capital with her and Juzi. If old Su and the others are willing to come, you can come with them. There will always be a place for you here. They had gone through the toughest days together, and experienced life and death together. The group of people far away in Qing'an Mansion were actually the most trustworthy people. Okay, I'll go back tomorrow. Feng had obviously been waiting for Li Yi to say this. He slapped his thigh and said, after going through so many things, they were used to treating Li Yi as their backbone. The son-in-law and mistress were both in the capital, so there was no point in them staying in Qing'an Fu. Those people were restless in their bones. If they followed the son-in-law, there would be exciting things to do. In just a short half a day, all the servants in the Li mansion had figured out the situation in the mansion. At the same time, they let out a long sigh of relief. Lord Ju and Madame's temperament was very good. They did not say a harsh word to them. Second Miss gave off a cold feeling and seemed difficult to get along with. However, when a maid accidentally tipped over a basin of water and wet her shoes, Second Miss did not say a word of reprimand. In addition, Madame's personal maid was very favored. She was just like the other master of the house. She must not be treated as a servant. Everyone secretly rejoiced at their luck. They did not have to worry about things like drowning ponds and filling wells in the future. Mississippi Lu returned to her room with a face full of anger. Li had chased her out of the courtyard in the name of going to bed early. It's only been half a month. What's there to catch up on? Li curled his lips. He closed the courtyard door and walked into his room. Rui stood by the bed and tidied up the bedding. She turned back and quickly turned back. Her gentle voice traveled over. When I came to the capital, I thought I would be going back soon. I didn't bring much with me. If we are going to stay in the capital in the future, I'm afraid we will have to go back as soon as possible to bring all the important things. At the very least, we have to bring the money at home. Li walked over slowly and hugged her from behind. Rui's hands paused. Her pretty face immediately turned red. "Who, hubby?" Her breathing was slightly hurried and her voice was barely audible. "My wife's words from before. Do they still stand?" Li whispered in her ear. Of course, she knew what Li was referring to. She slowly turned around. She was half a head lower than Li. Her face was even redder. She looked up into his eyes and nodded slightly. Li lowered his head to look at this flawless face. This was his wife, the person he was destined to spend the rest of his life with. Taking a deep breath, he exerted a bit of strength and hugged her tightly, pressing his lips against her smooth, jade-like forehead. Then he kissed her eyes, nose, and lips in the room. The candlelight flickered. A gust of wind blew in from an unknown source. The flame flickered a few times before it quietly extinguished. The beauty lowered her head shyly. The gifted scholar raised his eyebrows and smiled. A room full of love. Chapter 356. At noon, while Lord Ju and Madame were eating, the servants of the Li family gathered together and whispered to each other. When Xiaorong was pouring tea for Lord Ju this morning, she accidentally knocked over the teacup. Guess what happened next? A servant girl said mysteriously. Xiaorong is always so careless. She must have been scolded badly. She might even have been fined. Another servant girl pouted. If that was the case, I wouldn't have mentioned it in front of you. The servant girl who spoke first shook her head. Another servant girl was shocked and said in disbelief. Did Lord Ju kick Xiaorong out of the residence? What do you mean by kick out? Not only was Lord Ju not angry, he even rewarded her with money and said something about peace and quiet. The servant girl's face was full of envy. She wished that she was the one who broke the teacup. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. How could there be a servant who didn't get punished for doing something wrong, and instead get rewarded? If it was any other family, breaking a teacup in front of the master would be a light reprimand. A heavy punishment would be beating and scolding. Even 2 slaps would be considered a light punishment. There's more. A look of envy appeared on the maidservant's face as she continued. Xiao Qing's table was polished a little brighter, and the floor was swept a little cleaner. Lord Ju was so happy that he increased her salary by 50%. Everyone took a deep breath. Their faces were full of envy. On the first day, their monthly salary was increased by 50%. Why didn't such a good thing happen to them? At this point, the servants of the Li family understood that their Lord Ju had a habit of rewarding people whenever he was happy. It seemed that they had to perform well in the future. Their future was suddenly full of expectations. I understand now. No wonder Li San came out with a bunch of broken vase pieces. He already knew about it. A servant in green suddenly realized. Li San also got his monthly salary raised? Another servant said with some dissatisfaction. What the hell was this? They worked so hard, but they didn't get rewarded. Others who broke teacups and vases were either rewarded or increased salary. This was too unfair. A few servants were already thinking about what other worthless things there were in the residence. Should they find a chance to break them too? Otherwise, wouldn't they be at a disadvantage? Promotion fee? The well-informed servant girl shook her head and said, I heard that Li San was viciously kicked twice by Lord Ju. He is not allowed to eat until he fills the 2 large vats of water in the residence before nightfall. The servants looked at each other speechlessly. It seemed like this method was not going to work. Right, Xiaorong and Xiaoqing were both maidservants. Could it be that only the maidservants in the residence had this special exception? All the male servants immediately felt somewhat indignant in their hearts. This kind of matter, they couldn't decide for themselves. Why are you all gathered there? Have you all finished your work? A voice sounded out from behind. Everyone's faces changed as they dispersed. In the entire estate, compared to Lord Ju, they were even more afraid of Butler Li. Fong and a middle-aged man were squatting at the door, each holding a huge bowl in their hands, eating and chatting happily. Li called them twice, but they weren't willing to sit at the table, so he let them be. Old Foreign couldn't see and needed someone to serve her when she ate. For this matter, little Aunt wasn't willing to let the maidservants do it for her. She only sent someone to deliver the food to Old Foreign's room, and she fed Old Foreign mouthful by mouthful. At the dining table, Li placed all the dishes that Duanwu couldn't reach onto her plate. The little girl was too skinny. She was still growing and should eat more. Thank you, big brother. Perhaps it was because of her character from a young age. She didn't speak much and always had a timid look. Even though things were different now, it was a habit that was formed over a long period of time that wasn't easy to change. On one side sat Duanwu, and on the other side sat Xiaohuan. The most considerate servant girl was always the little servant girl. She knew what he liked to eat and what he didn't like to eat. In the time it took for Duanwu to take food, her own bowl also piled up into a small mountain. All right, that's enough. He stopped the little servant girl from taking more food into her bowl. Although the cooking skills of the Fu's maids were not bad, he still had to eat slowly. Mississippi Lu was still holding a grudge against him for forcefully chasing her away last night. There were a few times when Li Yi wanted to eat something, but she always snatched it away before he could. He was in a good mood today and didn't intend to argue with her. She raised her head and met Rui's eyes. A red cloud immediately appeared on her face, and she quickly lowered her head. Although they had been married for half a year, it had only been a day since they became real husband and wife. It was understandable that she was a little thin-skinned. Thinking about it, it was better to be alone. In a few days he would go back to Qing and Prefecture and arrange everything there. Only he and Rui would go back, without Mississippi Lu. It would be a honeymoon trip. It would be fun to walk and see along the way. The scripture for the old monk was almost finished. After a few days, he would send someone to Cold Mountain Temple. This matter would be settled. He still had to find a chance to discuss the business with Her Highness. It was definitely not enough to rely on the salary of the court to support the family. This matter concerned dozens of people in the Viscount's mansion, so he couldn't be careless. From a family of 4 to the master of such a big Viscount's mansion, it was not easy to adapt to the psychological gap. In addition, he had no experience and laziness. If Uncle Li, the housekeeper, didn't take care of everything, Li really didn't know how to run it. Not long after the meal, old mistress of the Li family came to the mansion in person. On the one hand, she wanted to see how her grandson's Viscount's mansion was doing. On the other hand, she had a lot to say to her granddaughter-in-law. The two of them talked in the room, and Li Yi was not allowed to go in. Later, old mistress saw that there were not many maids in the mansion, so she insisted on sending some from the Li family, but Li Yi persuaded her. There were not many people in the family. Why did they need so many maids to serve them? They didn't need to be used and took up space. What's more, these people needed to be paid. The mansion was still in the stage of development, so they should save as much as possible. In the end, old mistress walked into the courtyard where his grandmother's family lived. When Li Yi walked into the room, he saw her holding his grandmother's hand apologetically and saying, "I'm sorry for making you suffer all these years. If it weren't for the Li family, the He family wouldn't have lived so hard these years. But if it weren't for the He family, the Li family wouldn't have turned against the good in-laws and declined so much." It was no longer clear who was right and who was wrong about the things that happened in the past. However, even if the Li family declined, for the He family, who were just commoners, it was still an existence that they couldn't afford to reach. At first, old mistress was a little reserved, but later she gradually relaxed. When Li Yi walked out of the door, they talked about something happy, and their laughter could be heard far away. Chapter 357. Although the Li family had indeed been greatly affected by what had happened back then, wasn't the He family also a victim? Of the two old people, one had lost a son, and the other had lost a daughter. In this matter, they probably had very similar feelings. Li didn't disturb them. He walked all the way back to his room, stepped into the door, and saw Rui writing something at the table. In fact, in the family, only Xiaohuan didn't know much. Although sister Rui didn't go to school, she was literate. Li walked closer and quietly watched her write. Perhaps because of practicing martial arts, she had excellent control. This beautiful hairpin-style small regular script was not written by ordinary people at all. There is a beauty in the north, peerless and independent. Seeing the beautiful handwriting on the paper, Li Yi was slightly stunned. This poem was copied by him for Zhang Zimo. Although in the end, it helped her more than she helped, the poem must have been spread out. It was not surprising that Rui knew about it. However, Rui had never been interested in these things. Why was she so abnormal today and copying poems? Seeing Li Yi coming over, she put down the pen and said with a smile. A smile can make a city fall, and another smile can make a country fall. Being described like this by my husband, Lady Zue Mo, the goddess of Luo Shui, must be extremely beautiful when she smiles. The expression on Li Yi's face was a little awkward. After all, if his wife knew that he had praised other women like this outside, he would always be a little lacking in confidence. Especially when he had accidentally seen that woman's naked body. However, Zhang Zimo was a stubborn girl. Although she was a little stubborn, there was nothing to say about her beauty. Her figure was simply heaven-defying. Compared to Rui, each had their own merits. If only Li Yi soon found that his thoughts were anchored. He laughed dryly and said, "In fact, it's not that good. Poems are always exaggerated. A smile can make a city fall. How can there be such a thing? This is not beauty, it's sorcery." Rui was silent for a long time. She seemed to have made up her mind and said, "If you are really interested in Lady Zimo, how about?" Li Yi quickly waved his hand and said, "Don't get me wrong. Lady Zueyamo and I are just friends. At that time, I just wanted to help her win the championship. I had no other intentions." For Rui to be able to say this sentence, it really made Li Yi extremely surprised. Based on what she said, the next thing she wanted to say was to welcome her into the house. This happiness had come too suddenly. Although almost all men yearned for a life with a group of wives and concubines, especially when their wives and concubines were so beautiful. As a good young man in the 21st century, he had received modern ideological education and was deeply influenced by monogamy. Of course, Li Yi had also yearned for it. However, there was a big difference between thinking about it and actually doing it. On the one hand, there was such a beautiful and gentle wife at home, so it was unlikely that he would have other thoughts. On the other hand, feelings could not be forced. Although Zhang Zimo was beautiful, had a good figure, could sing, dance and draw well, it would be a problem if a man did not have any thoughts when facing her. If he could welcome her home, just thinking about it was a bit, bah. On the one hand, there was no emotional foundation. On the other hand, she did not have any feelings for him. This matter was not feasible at all. Rui looked up at him and whispered, "Don't worry, husband. I am not a jealous woman. If you did not have feelings for Lady Zueyamo, how could you write such a poem? Don't, it's just a few poems. If you are willing, I can write 10 or even 100 for you now. Lady Zueyamo and I are really not what you think." Li hurriedly explained. Rui's temperament was still more traditional. She considered everything from her own standpoint, which made Li Yi feel angry and amused at the same time. How could there be a legal wife who would take care of finding a concubine for her husband? If the person who said this was Mississippi Liu, then he would definitely refuse her sternly at the first moment, and give her a severe ideological education, indicating that he was devoted to Rui and had never thought of taking a concubine. Because he knew that as long as he showed a certain desire in front of Mississippi Liu, what was waiting for him was definitely not a happy life with a beautiful wife and concubine, but a sword that would cut him in the head. But since Rui could say so, she must have thought so. He didn't know how long she had been struggling when she made this decision. "Husband, you really didn't." When Rui raised her head and spoke uncertainly, Li Yi had already held her in his arms, patted her shoulder, and said, "Don't think too much. I really didn't mean it. Don't say that I didn't mean it. Lady Zueyamo didn't mean it either. Don't say these words again." The relationship between men and women in this world was still conservative. If they were not husband and wife, they probably wouldn't have too much contact on normal days. However, for Li Yi, who had a modern mind, it was really normal to have a few friends of the opposite sex. Even Fong had a mysterious little Hong. If their temperaments were compatible and their temperaments were congenial, A friendship that started with feelings and ended with etiquette was still worth advocating. With Wanruoqing, with Zhengzuemo, with Emingzu, these were all the purest relationships between men and women, except for the occasional dreams he would dream of them. But this kind of thing was out of Li Yi's control, and he had never had any improper thoughts in reality. If he really got all of them together, even if he didn't worry about the harmony of the harem, he would have to worry about his kidneys. I understand, Rui said softly with a slightly red face. A light cough came from the door. Mississippi Lou knocked on the door and said, "Have you guys hugged enough? Someone is looking for you outside. It seems to be from the palace." After saying that, she looked into the room with a strange look, turned around and left. Rui hurriedly left Li Yi's arms, and her face became even redder. Li Yi's expression was slightly annoyed. He was always disturbed at the critical moment. Rui was getting more and more unruly. Thinking about what the people from the palace were doing, he inadvertently glanced down and found that there was not only the beauty song on the table, but almost all the poems he had given to Zhengzuemo. Thinking about it for a while, although most of these poems were exaggerated, he had to admit that the stubborn girl was impeccable except for her stubborn temper. Whoever married her would really enjoy a good life. He turned to look at Rui and asked tentatively, "My wife just said that if I am interested in Miss Zuemo, what will happen?" Rui was stunned, and suddenly the corners of her mouth curved up. She smiled and said, "What did I say just now?" After a moment of daze, Li Yi also smiled, shook his head, and walked out of the room. Looking at his back as he left, the smile on Rui's mouth spread. She put the poems on the table carefully in the drawer, and a rare slyness flashed in her eyes. Chapter 358. Thinking about what happened just now, even Rui knew how to play tricks, which made Li Yi, who thought he knew her very well, feel tired. Fortunately, he held his bottom line just now and was not fooled by the bait she threw out. If he had been careless and exposed his thoughts as a man, what would have happened? He didn't know. Even he couldn't figure out Rui now. The person who came from the palace was still a eunuch, but he was not someone Li Yi knew. He stood straight in the front hall with a straight face. When he saw Li Yi coming in, he stepped forward and said in an emotionless voice, "His Majesty has ordered me to teach mathematics to the princes and princesses. Today, the Doctor of Mathematics of the Imperial College is on leave due to illness. In order not to delay the studies of the princes and princesses, please come with me to the palace now." Now, Li Yi frowned. He was in such a hurry that he didn't even give people time to prepare for the lessons. What was he going to teach in the palace without any preparation? The eunuch urged with a straight face, "The studies of the princes can't be delayed. You'd better hurry up, Li Yi." I know. Wait a minute, I'll come out soon." Li Yi waved his hand, turned back and said a few words to Rui. Soon he came out, looked at the eunuch and said lightly, "Let's go." A carriage was already parked outside the palace. Given the distance from here to the palace, it would only take them an hour to get there. The group of little princesses and princes were about 7 to 10 years old. In the future, under normal circumstances, their mathematics level would be at the level of a second or third grader in elementary school. However, considering that they had never taken mathematics classes before and did not know what the previous classes were like, Li Yi decided to start from the basics. Of course, teaching materials were not a problem. There were all kinds of teaching materials from kindergarten to university. The teaching materials in the future were professionally certified and couldn't be more scientific. Any one of them would do. He showed his waist token at the gate of the palace and walked in with the eunuch. Last time, when he came out of the palace, Li Yi remembered some directions. The princes and princesses went to school in Bowen Hall. They would pass by the food bureau on the way, so the distance between them was not far. When he walked to the door of Bowen Hall, the eunuch said and stood outside the hall to wait. "County Magistrate Li, there is still a quarter of an hour before the princesses and princes start to study. You can go in first." Bowen Hall was a small palace. When Li walked into the hall, he saw that there were low tables and low tables in the hall. Perhaps it was not time yet, so there was no one in the hall, There was only a fatty sleeping on the table in front of him. From the back, the little fatty should be about the same age as Li Yingkai, but his body was slightly smaller than Li Yingkai. Li Yingkai was sleeping. Perhaps Li Yi's footsteps woke him up. The little fatty suddenly jumped up from his seat and said loudly, "Disciple rules, sage teachings, first filial piety, second honesty. I didn't sleep, I didn't sleep." After saying this, he found that there was no one around. Then he remembered that it was not the old man's class today. He just wanted to sleep on the table for a while before the boring math class began. Since he was not sleeping in the class of the old man, and the old man would not complain to his father, then there was nothing to be afraid of. The little fatty turned his head angrily and glared at the guy who disturbed his sleep. "You are. It's you." Seeing that there was another person in the hall, the anger on the little fatty's face immediately disappeared. He asked, "Hey, are you here to make delicious food for us?" The last time Shanning invited them to eat that strange thing, he still couldn't forget it. The imperial chefs in the palace tried several times, but couldn't make that kind of taste. He had been thinking about it for 2 days. No. Li shook his head and said. He asked this kind of question as soon as they met. No wonder this prince could be so strong, at such a young age. The little fatty slapped the table and pretended to be dignified. He said, "I am Prince Jin Li Han. I order you to go to the food bureau and make the same food as last time." Li looked around and was indifferent to the words of the young prince. Last time, it was because of the old emperor's decree and the arrogant Lolita's face. But now it was different. He was not the imperial chef and had no obligation to cook for them. If you dare to not listen to me, believe it or not, I will ask my father to beat you." Seeing that Li Yi was indifferent, the little fatty raised his eyebrows and threatened. Li Yi had a lot of experience dealing with naughty children. The bear prince was just a kind of naughty child, nothing to be afraid of. As a prince, Li Han had always gotten whatever he wanted in the palace. Other than being afraid of his father, afraid of eldest royal sister, afraid of Shou Ning, afraid of Li Li who would bite people, afraid of that old man, afraid of another old man, afraid of. Who else had he been afraid of? In short, a chef from the food bureau dared to disobey his orders. This made Prince Jin very angry. "You dare to be disrespectful to me? Just you wait, I will tell my father today." Li Han looked at Li Yi and said angrily. If he didn't beat him, he wouldn't be able to vent his anger. But he couldn't beat him too hard. Otherwise, who would cook for him? Not long after Li Han's words fell, 7 to 8 figures came in from the door. There were men and women, and the one in the lead was Princess Shanning. Why are you here?" When she saw Li Yi, Princess Shanning was pleasantly surprised. Among the princes and princesses, a few had seen Li Yi before, but they only thought he was a chef from the food bureau. Those who didn't eat hot pot with Shanning last time were seeing him for the first time. The eunuch walked over and said with a flattering smile, "Your Highness, County Li will be your mathematics teacher from now on." Li gave him a meaningful look. This guy was livid in front of him, but he was smiling so brightly in front of the princess. This was blatant discrimination. "Teacher." Prince Jin was stunned for a moment, then his face became dull. Since when could a chef from the Shangshi Bureau be their teacher? Princess Shanning didn't care about whether he was a teacher or not. She said with surprise, "Teach me how to make hot pot later. I didn't learn it last time." "Let's talk about it later." Li nodded. He looked at the group of princesses and princes and said, "Since all the princes and princesses are here, let's start." Perhaps it was because of the special status of the princesses and princes that they were even more obedient to the rules. Without the temptation of a story, they all returned to their seats and sat properly. Even Li Han, who had wanted to hit him with the paddle just now, did not do anything out of line. First, Shanning introduced the princesses and princes. After Li noted them down, he asked about the progress of her mathematics class. The answer he got was that they were still at the stage of learning Arabic numerals. The mathematics teacher from before was teaching them how to convert Chinese numerals into Arabic numerals. In other words, their mathematics was still at the most primitive stage. There was no blackboard or chalk in this world. Most of the courses they had to learn were taught. However, it was impossible to understand mathematics with just one's mouth. Fortunately, the mathematics teacher from before understood this. He stuck the white paper on the upright wooden board and wrote with a brush. It was similar to the blackboard of the future. Before we start teaching, let's do a test. Li turned around and wrote on the white paper with a brush. 36, 451, 68,832, 89,563, 75,467. When the princes and princesses were still wondering what the test was, Li said again, "Write these numbers on the paper with Arabic numerals." Li looked at Li Han, who was looking around, and a smile appeared on his face. He said, "Your Highness, come up and write." Chapter 359. Soon, the princes and princesses understood what the test was. Usually, when the teacher was in class, he would give them some tests, such as reciting articles, explaining the meaning of a certain sentence, and so on. If they could answer correctly, the teacher would praise them. If they couldn't answer correctly, there would be no punishment. The teacher would only repeat those things again, or tell them to study hard. Only the mathematics teacher didn't care about their identity as princes and princesses. He would often hit their hands. His father actually acquiesced to this. Fortunately, the person teaching them mathematics would be changed in the future. The teacher in front of them seemed to be easy to bully. Obviously, Prince Jean thought so. Why should it be me? I'm not going. Li Han's round face was filled with anger. Although he was young, he was not stupid. He just said that he would tell his father to hit the other party. Now he was asking him to go up and lose face. This was obviously revenge. Only a fool would really go up. The teacher's ABA number was not fun at all. It was crooked and ugly. It was not written from top to bottom. He didn't even remember those numbers until now. Those millions, how would he know what those crooked numbers were? He would definitely lose face if he went up. For Prince Jean, who cared about his face, this was unbearable. Li didn't care at all. He looked at him and said, "It's fine if Your Highness Prince Jean doesn't want to come up. This time, your test result is 0. I will write Your Highness's result on a red paper and post it outside the Bowen Hall. In the future, it will be the same rule. Every once in a while, I will give you a test. All the unqualified scores will be posted outside, so that everyone can see it." When Li Han heard this, his face suddenly turned pale. Although he wasn't clear about the meaning of 0, he knew that it was the worst grade. Prince Jean Li Han is the worst among all the princes and princesses. If such a thing was posted outside, he was afraid that it would quickly spread throughout the palace. At that time, how would his father look at him? How would his mother look at him? How would his brothers and sisters, eunuchs and palace maids look at him? Just imagining it made Li Han's face turn even paler. He no longer dared to ask why and hurriedly stood up. Although he was a prince, he did not dare to be disrespectful to the teacher. If his father found out, he would definitely be punished. Li Han picked up the brush and bit his thumb as he struggled with the numbers. Li walked down and wandered around the tables. For the princes and princesses who were used to writing Chinese characters, Arabic numerals were still a relatively novel thing. They had some mathematical foundations, but they were all based on another system. First impressions were the strongest, so it was impossible for their thinking to change so quickly. Even the simplest numbers were messed up by them. The order of the numbers was reversed, and they remembered the wrong numbers. There were all kinds of problems. The one with the highest accuracy rate was actually shining. Only one number was missing a digit. Looking back at Li Han's name, it was a tragic sight to behold. Luckily, he had written the simplest number correctly, so it wasn't a complete wipeout. "Okay, you can leave." Li Yi waved his hand at him. Li Han immediately put down the brush and ran back to his seat. He stared at Li Yi with wide eyes, afraid that the word 0 would come out of his mouth. "Not bad, you got one right." Li Yi picked up the brush and put a tick on a certain number. Although he did not know what it meant, it was not 0, so he did not have to be posted outside the Bowen Hall. Li Han let out a long sigh of relief. The most basic things were taught like this. Thinking about it, the previous mathematics teacher did not fully understand it. Li could only treat them as preschoolers. If he wanted to teach them mathematics, he first had to let them remember how to write numbers. There was no shortcut. Li wrote down the numbers 0 to 9 and let them keep repeating it. After estimating the time, Li gently patted the table and said, "Okay, take a break for 15 minutes. You can go play outside and come back after 15 minutes." Every time he taught, it was 2 hours. How long could a 7 or 8-year-old child concentrate? Not to mention that they could not accept 2 hours of nonstop teaching. Even Li himself could not accept it. Seeing that a few princes were obviously a little absent-minded, Li simply let them take a break during the lesson. The princes and princesses had never taken a break during the lesson before. Their buttocks would hurt after sitting for 2 hours. Today it was not even half the time, and they could actually go out to play. As soon as Li Yi's voice fell, they put down their brushes and rushed out like a swarm of bees. After a while, the eunuch ran in anxiously and said, "Li Xianzi, His Majesty asked you to teach the princes and princesses. Why are you? Are you teaching or am I teaching?" Li Yi glared at him and said, "Is there any tea? Bring a pot over, I'm thirsty." After a while, the eunuch went to prepare tea. He felt that Li Xianzi's temper was even worse than the other great scholars who taught the princes and princesses. After teaching for more than half an hour without a break, Li Yi was already thirsty. After standing for a long time, his legs were a little tired, so he walked out of the hall and sat on the steps to rest. In front of the Bowen Hall was a large square. At this time, the sun was shining brightly. The princes and princesses were chasing and playing in the square. Li Yi was a little confused. He did not see Princess Yongning, the silly little girl, today. Was she not here for class? "Your Highness, why is Princess Yongning not here? Doesn't she need to attend class?" Hearing Li Yi's voice, Li Han, who had just walked out of the hall, shivered. He pointed to a corner not far away and said, "Yongning is there. She never attends class." After saying that, he disappeared like a wisp of smoke. Li looked in the direction of his finger and saw a small figure sitting there. It seemed that she did not fit in with the whole world. A little princess and a little prince stood beside her and reached out to pull the doll in her arms. She just hugged it tightly and did not say a word. When Li Yi walked over, the little princess and the prince ran away. Princess Yongning looked up and was startled. She took out a transparent bead from her arms, put it in her palm, and handed it to Li Yi. "For me?" Li Yi took the bead and asked with some surprise. The little girl nodded, stood up with the doll in her arms, and walked away. Li Yi looked at the bead in his hand. It looked like glass but not quite like it. Was this the reward she gave him for the bowl of egg-fried rice? However, the little princess was obviously unwilling to communicate with people. Li Yi looked at her slowly leaving back, shook his head, put away the bead, turned around and walked back. The break between classes was really useful. The princes and princesses, who sat back in their seats, were obviously more focused than before. "Now let's start class." Li Yi glanced at the crowd, pointed to 2 people and said, "Your Highness, Prince of Zhou, Princess of Anyang, please come up here and write the 10 numbers I just taught you on it." I knew it. Seeing his 2 younger brothers and sisters reluctantly walking up, Prince Jin Li Han screamed wildly in his heart. He saw the scene of Anyang and Li Zhe bullying Yongning just now. If you don't want to be the laughingstock of the whole palace, remember not to provoke Yongning and Master in the future. Chapter 360. Perhaps because of the strict etiquette of the royal family, it was a very easy thing to teach the princes and princesses. The accident that Li Yi expected did not happen. Except for a small episode with Prince Jin at the beginning, the first class was quite smooth. Today's main objective was to let them understand numbers and learn how to write. There were only 2 hours of time, and the break took up less than an hour, so they couldn't teach much. Moreover, they had to consider whether they could accept being taught too much. Every substitute teacher had to cultivate their own spies, or claws and teeth. In layman's terms, they were lackeys. Princess Shawning, who was the most intelligent and had the most solid foundation, naturally became the representative of the mathematics subject. In addition to maintaining classroom discipline, She also had the responsibility of supervising and checking the completion of extracurricular homework by her younger brothers and sisters. After promising Shanning to teach her how to make hot pot, after the lecture, Li Yi personally demonstrated it to her in the Shang Food Bureau. The old emperor's asthma couldn't eat spicy food, so he didn't even put dogwood in it. There were also a lot of things to pay attention to in the sauce. This time, Shanning played the good tradition of a good memory and a bad pen. She recorded the steps one by one. She had never been so active in class. Although the little loli was occasionally arrogant, she was sensible and filial. When Li Yi taught her, he didn't hold back. He didn't even hide some ultimate secret skills. Before leaving, he took 2 cucumbers from the Shang Food Bureau. At the end of the first lunar month, it was cold in spring. This thing could only be eaten in the palace. The 4 guards of the Li family were guarding at the gate of the palace. The carriage of the Viscount's mansion was parked there. Li Yi got on the carriage. The coachman flicked his whip, and the carriage slowly moved forward. This carriage was given by the old emperor. The feudal society was strict, and the etiquette was even stricter. There were laws and regulations on who took what carriage, and what to rely on. When you go out and see the other's carriage, you know whether you can afford to provoke the person inside or not. Of course, Li Yi was now one of the group of people who couldn't afford to provoke. The carriage was the best, but it turned out that 2 wheels were sometimes not as good as 2 legs. Unexpectedly, there was a traffic jam in the city. There was already a long queue of carriages in front of him. Li Yi could only get off the carriage and order them to take a detour and wait for him at the city gate. After walking on both sides of the road for about 10 meters, they finally saw the source of the crowd. In front of a medicine shop, a group of people blocked the road, so that not even a drop of water could trickle through. The people of Qi are all up to no good. How dare they sell fake medicine to us? Smash their shops. A voice shouted. Someone immediately chimed in. That's right. Harming the people of our Jing kingdom in the capital city. This shop should have been destroyed long ago. The door of the medicine shop was tightly shut. Due to the excitement of the crowd, everyone threw everything they could at the door. Stones, rotten leaves, rotten eggs. The entrance of the medicine shop immediately became a mess. Li Yi had no intention of watching the commotion. He took a detour and walked towards the city gate in front of him. The Jing kingdom had been bullied by the Qi kingdom for decades. Although the people of the Jing kingdom were not on bad terms with each other, there was never a lack of angry youths. There were always people with strong national pride, who felt that the people of the Qi kingdom were all bad people, and should be destroyed by humanitarianism. Originally, if Jinghua had always been bullied, this kind of conflict would not have escalated. After all, the fist was the hard truth. If there really was a conflict, based on the principle of maintaining international harmony and protecting international friends, the government would, to a certain extent, side the people of Qi to avoid becoming enemies with Qi again. However, things were different now. Just a few days ago, the state of Jing, which had always been suppressed by the Qi, suddenly turned the tables and fought a beautiful battle. The state of Jing, which had always been the initiator of peace negotiations, had gained the upper hand this time, and even occupied 2 of the other cities. The international situation had reversed in an instant. The long-accumulated resentment of the citizens of the state of Jing had finally been vented, and the people of Qi living in the state of Jing had suffered. At this time, there was no such thing as rational patriotism. It was not important whether the medicine sold in the medicine shop was fake or not. What was important was that this shop belonged to the people of the Qi kingdom. The envoy from the Qi kingdom was about to arrive. At this time, they had to show their country's might, and let them know that the people of the Jing kingdom were not so easily bullied. Li Yi did not intend to watch the commotion. He had not eaten yet. As a teacher to the princes and princesses, not only was the salary low, but they did not even provide him with meals. His mouth was dry and his stomach was hungry. The royal family lacked the basic human care. How many officials like him would be bitterly disappointed? Benefactor, please wait a moment. A voice came from behind. Li Yi looked back and saw 2 monks walking towards him. Benefactor, may I ask how to get to the Fahua temple? An old monk asked with a smile. The other middle-aged monk was dressed plainly, and held a metal rod in his hand. His face was narrow and thin, and he stood expressionlessly behind the old monk. He gave off a lot of pressure. I don't know. Li took another look at the middle-aged monk, then shook his head. He pointed to the crowd in front and said to the old monk, "Why don't you go there and ask, Reverend?" He did not know where the Fahua temple was, but he knew how to get to the Cold Mountain Temple. Oh right, he could finish copying the sutra today. It was time to send it to the old monk Tan-in. Amitba. Thank you, benefactor. The old monk smiled and turned to walk in the direction of the crowd. During the meal, he learned that the whole family would be going to the Cold Mountain Temple under the guidance of the old lady. The temple fair at the Cold Mountain Temple had just ended a few days ago, and an even more lively and grand Dharma assembly had begun. The Cold Mountain Temple was funded by the imperial court to set up a vegetarian diet, promote Buddhism, and praise the virtues of Buddha. It was said that these days, all the famous monks in the Jing kingdom would gather at the Cold Mountain Temple. Even the shameless ones would try their best to get close to the Cold Mountain Temple. Such a grand Dharma assembly was only held once a year. It was said that not only the dignitaries of the Jing kingdom, but even the royal family would also participate. If he showed his face in front of the royal family and made his presence known, he might be given the title of a monk of great virtue. Later, he heard from Xiaohuan that the old lady actually wanted to bring the young mistress to worship the child-giving Guanyin. She wanted to worship all the gods and Buddhas, as long as she could give her a great-grandson. Li felt that it was a little far-fetched to pray to Buddha for a great-grandson. It was only useful to pray to him for this kind of thing. Since they were going to the Cold Mountain Temple tomorrow, they could just help him take the scripture. He didn't know what kind of superstition the old lady had that all the people she brought were women, and she didn't allow him to go with them. But anyway, he was too lazy to go. What was so interesting about a group of monks chanting scriptures? If it was a young and beautiful nun, it might be a little interesting. But if that was the case, the old lady might not let him go. When you go tomorrow, help me give this scripture to an old monk called Tan-in. When copying the scripture, Li specially chose the short ones to copy. In fact, it would have taken him a few days to finish, but because he cut corners, he finished the task not long after dinner. If he really took out all the Buddhist scriptures in the library, he would not be able to do anything else for the rest of his life. This scripture was all the scriptures of the scriptures. It was definitely enough to deal with the old monk. Xiaohuan took the scripture and opened it. She only felt dizzy from reading so many words. She hurriedly closed the book and nodded. She said, "Don't worry, young master. I will definitely give it to the old monk personally. Remember to call him Great Master tomorrow." When Li walked out of the study, he added, Chapter 361. Lord Ju, Lord Ju. Li struggled to open his eyes and saw the maidservant named Xiaoqing standing at the head of the bed, gently pushing his shoulders. There was no one beside him for a long time. Rui was going to the temple with old madam to offer incense, so Li didn't know when she woke up. What time is it now? Li sat up from the bed, rubbing his eyes as he asked. Lord Ju, it's almost past midnight, the pretty maidservant said with a red face, not daring to look at the half-naked Li. Midnight. Li was stunned when he heard that. He didn't expect to wake up at 10 o'clock. It seemed like he shouldn't stay up too late at night in the future. Xiaoqing didn't forget why she came to wake Lord Ju up, so she said, Lord Ju, hurry up and get up. His Highness is waiting for you outside. Li Xian, what is he doing here? Li quickly put on his clothes and washed his face with Xiaoqing's help. He walked out and saw Li Xian standing in the courtyard. You actually slept until now? Li Xian's face was full of disbelief. He didn't know that Li was in such a state at home. Li glanced at him and continued to rinse his mouth with the green salt. It wasn't even 11 o'clock and it wasn't time to eat yet. Was this considered late? Stop dawdling. Hurry up and come with me. Li Xian walked over and tugged at his sleeve, dragging him outside. Li had mouthwash in his mouth as he said unclearly, Where are we going? Don't pull and pull like this. If someone sees us, it won't be good. Two married men pulling at each other in public. What a scandal. Where did the rules of this guy go to? The servants of the Li family stared dumbfoundedly as their Lord Ju was dragged out of the house and into a horse carriage. Not a single person stopped him. Even the guards just stood there and watched, not moving an inch. The people standing outside the door were people they couldn't afford to offend. Where are we going? Li Yi wiped his mouth with his sleeve. Having just woken up, he was still a bit groggy. Mount Han, the glider has made great progress. When the time comes, you can see if there are any areas that can be improved. You made that thing so quickly? Li Yi was somewhat surprised at Li Xian's efficiency. Li Xian said, I borrowed a few craftsmen from the overseer and told them that it was a weapon for the battlefield. They made it in 3 days. It was naturally impossible to test the effects on a grassy slope, so Mount Han, as the mountain closest to the capital, became the best testing ground. Li Xian didn't climb to the top of the mountain. Halfway up the mountain, he had the guards drag out a large box from a carriage behind him and quickly assemble the things inside. It was exactly the same as the blueprint that Li Yi had drawn for him. He had also made some changes to it, but at the very least, it was much better than the large kite from before. On a certain cliff, a guard's face was filled with a tragic expression. Although he had already tested it many times and the parachute bag on his back could guarantee that he wouldn't die even if he jumped off, he still couldn't help but feel nervous when he glanced down the cliff. In the end, the guard still clenched his teeth, clung to the bottom of the fuselage, and with a long run-up, disappeared from the cliff. Seeing a small dot that maintained a certain altitude the entire time, and flew off into the distance, Li Xian's face finally revealed an excited expression. Humanity's dream of flying into the sky had been greatly advanced. Li Yi watched as the guard circled a few times in the air before finally landing on the ground. Standing at the bottom of the cliff, he incessantly waved his hand. Can we go back now? Li Yi yawned and asked. After waking up in the morning, he had been dragged here without even eating, just to see the guard of the heir's estate fly in a circle in the air. If he had been a little more clear-headed back then, he definitely wouldn't have followed Li Xian here, but would have instead sunbathed in his own courtyard. Go back for what? Li Xian shook his head and said, Today is the Water and Land Assembly of Cold Mountain Temple. Emingzu and Shanning are both on the mountain. If I hadn't specifically gone to the Viscount's estate to find you, I would have gone up with them. At the Water and Land Assembly, several virtuous and eminent monks will publicly demonstrate the Dharma, allowing all living beings to feel enlightened and be nourished by the water of Dharma. Many nobles in the capital, including many princesses and princes, will also participate, receiving the Dharma's illumination and the protection of all the gods and Buddhas in the world. In this world, Buddhism truly was flourishing. Even Li Xian spoke of these things in one set after another. Li Yi waved his hand and said, I just want to ask, is there anything to eat up there? Yes. Li Xian nodded. Vegetarian food will be given at every assembly, and there will be many vendors selling food outside the temple. It was not a good habit not to eat breakfast, nor was it a good habit to sleep until 10 o'clock in the morning, because one would be hungry before it was time to eat, and not too hungry when it was time for lunch after breakfast. There were indeed many vendors selling food on the top of the mountain. The Water and Land Assembly would be held for at least 7 days. And there were so many believers coming and going from all over the country. Of course, some small vendors would not let go of this great opportunity, and even the plum forest was occupied. But today, their business was destined not to be good. Of course, the nobles in the capital would not crowd with ordinary people. So on the first day of this assembly, the Cold Mountain Temple was not open to ordinary people, so there would be very few ordinary believers going up the mountain today. And those who were used to living a luxurious life would naturally not buy food from the roadside stalls outside, because of their status. Except for Li Yi. The steamed bun vendor finally welcomed his first customer of the day, and was so excited that he was about to cry, selling him 2 trays of steamed buns for 5 copper coins. The monk guarding the door saw the customer carrying the steamed buns enter the temple, and wanted to stop him, but when he looked up and saw that it was someone that even Master Tan Yin had to come out to see off, he immediately retreated. Anyway, the rules were not made for these nobles, so it was better to avoid trouble. There were eminent monks preaching everywhere in the temple, and Li Yi did not see Rui, Xiaohuan and the others. He felt that if he listened to the old monk preach while eating steamed buns, he might be chased out, so he gave up the idea of going in to look for them. The steamed bun stall owner was an honest man, and gave a large amount of steamed buns. Li Yi could not finish them alone, and Li Xian did not care to eat them. When he passed it to the guards of the crown prince's residence, he was ignored, but he felt it was a pity to throw it away. At this moment he felt someone patting him on the back. He turned and saw the proud Lolita with her hair in a stunning bun. She handed the paper bag forward. "Do you want steamed buns?" Like teacher, like disciple. As Li Yi's favorite disciple, Princess Shaning clearly had the same taste as her teacher. The princess of the Jing kingdom often seemed to be hungry, and the few steamed buns left by Li Yi were quickly finished by Princess Shaning. The veins on the foreheads of the palace guards and palace maids who followed behind her were about to burst. If not for Princess Yongla's silence, they would have taken down this bold person long ago. "Shaning, so you are here." A young man walked over from behind, followed by several other young people, all of whom had an extraordinary aura. Imperial brother. Seeing the young man, Princess Shaning walked over quickly and smiled. "What did you eat just now?" The young man frowned, took out a clean handkerchief from his bosom, and wiped the corner of Princess Shaning's mouth. "Nothing, nothing." The proud Lolita ran back with a guilty conscience. "Greetings to the King of Shu." The palace guards and palace maids all bowed to the young man. The young man waved his hand, walked up and said to Emingzu, "There are many people in the temple. Look after Shaning, don't let her run around." Emingzu nodded, but Princess Shaning twitched her mouth and said, "Who ran around?" The young man smiled and rubbed her head, saying, "Imperial brother still has things to do, so I won't accompany you. You have to listen to Imperial sister." Got it, Princess Shaning said impatiently. The young man shook his head, glanced at Li Xian, and slowly walked away with the people behind him. Only when the few of them had disappeared did Li Yi turn his head to look at Li Xian. He saw that Li Xian's expression was calm. Usually, when Li Xian revealed such an expression, it meant that he was not in a good mood. Li Yi asked suspiciously, "Do you have a grudge with the King of Shu?" Chapter 362. It's not really a big grudge. Li Xian looked away from the backs of those people and said, "When I was a child in the imperial palace, the King of Shu was the leader of the princes who bullied me. Also," his voice paused for a while before he continued, "the woman whom he had tried to marry over and over again is now my heir's consort." Li Yi's eyes widened. The hatred of stealing his wife was not a big grudge. It was one of the two biggest grudges in one's life. The King of Shu did not hand him a knife the moment they met, which showed that he had great self-restraint. He could not help but give him a thumbs up. It was never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. The King of Shu probably did not expect that the little prince whom he bullied a decade ago would take revenge in such a way in the future. The King of Shu and his wife are childhood sweethearts. Li Yi was not very curious about other people's affairs, but he was more concerned about his few friends. As a prince of a country, he had been rejected time and time again. Yet he was still able to persevere. If they really were childhood sweethearts, Li Xian wouldn't have been right to break up the affectionate couple. "I don't think we've met before," Li Xian said after thinking for a while. Li Yi was even more puzzled and asked, "Since they don't know each other, why does he insist on marrying you?" Li Xian glanced at him and said, "When your wife took you up the mountain, she didn't know you either, did she?" Li Yi's face darkened. Damn it, what grudge did the King of Shu have with this guy? It had nothing to do with him. Who cares? I won't ask any more. He waved to the arrogant Lolita not far away. "Shaning, let's go listen to the old monks chanting." The King of Shu is the son of imperial concubine Shui, and is the eldest among the princes. According to the rules of the royal family, the eldest son is not the youngest. The empress only has one daughter, Emingzu, and has no other princes. In the harem, imperial concubine Shui is the most respected. Therefore, the King of Shu is the most powerful prince in the competition for the title of crown prince. Li Xian said indifferently. Although imperial uncle hasn't appointed a crown prince because he doesn't have a legitimate son, the empress hasn't had a son for many years. In the past 2 years, the court has been talking about the position of crown prince. Although the king of Shu has the support of noble consort Cui and the Cui family behind him, if he can marry into the Wang family, he will be able to gain the support of 2 powerful families. Li Yi was a little stunned when he heard that. Did that mean that the young man from earlier, Li Xian's irreconcilable enemy, was actually the best candidate to become the next ruler of the empire? There was an 80 to 90% chance that he would become the successor of the old emperor. According to the old emperor's physical condition, that day would not be far away. The next emperor of the Jing kingdom would ascend the throne in a few years, or at least a year or 2. However, our crown prince Li Xian had stolen the wife of the next emperor and his wife's family. This was not a big enmity, but a big one. The enmity of stealing his wife would affect his plan to seize the throne. Would Prince Ning's family have a good life after the king of Shu became the real emperor? This was not realistic. Fortunately, even though Li Xian was a fool, Prince Ning didn't look like someone who would suffer a loss. Li didn't need to worry about this matter for him. Thinking about it this way, the Wang clan was truly blind. They didn't try to curry favor with such a great potential stock. In another 2 years, he would become a relative of the emperor, and a meteoric rise was just around the corner. Why did they have to fall for a coward like Li Xian? Imperial concubine, family, inheritance of the throne, and all these twists and turns of the royal family gave them a headache. Li Yi waved his hand again and said, "Shanning, let's go and watch the old monk preach." In the nearest Buddhist hall, there was a highly virtuous monk preaching Buddhism. The hall was filled with praying mats, and the followers were sitting upright on them. It was unknown if they could understand what he was preaching, but they looked very solemn and focused. What is this master preaching? The proud little girl leaned against the door and asked doubtfully. She could only hear the monk mumbling something, but she could not make out a single word. "She'll lower your voice. The master is preaching the Diamond Sutra." Li Yi made a shushing gesture to her, but his eyes were darting around the Buddhist hall, looking for Rui and the others. The proud little girl looked up at Li Yi, and her big eyes began to twinkle like little stars. The teacher was indeed a teacher. He could even understand such a difficult Buddhist scripture. At this moment, a sigh suddenly came from behind them. Ba, little benefactor Li Yi, Master Huyen is preaching the Lunga Sutra." The old monk Tan Yin raised his palm and chanted the name of Buddha. He looked at Li Yi and said helplessly. The corner of Li Yi's mouth twitched. This old monk must have a disease that would kill him if he did not expose him. Moreover, he only caught him and tried to expose him. It was said that monks were merciful and left him some face. Wasn't it considered as accumulating merit? To think that he had worked so hard to help him copy so many scriptures, and he even said that he would repay him in the future. Was this how Buddhism repaid kindness? Little benefactor Li Yi, on behalf of Buddhism, I am very grateful for your kindness. When the old monk spoke again, the expression on his face became solemn and solemn. He was indeed a famous master. At first glance, he really looked like an eminent monk. "It's nothing." Li Yi waved his hand. He was magnanimous and did not intend to fuss over the old monk's act of biting the hand that fed him. "It's nothing to you, but it's a great merit to our Buddhism." A smile appeared on Li Yi's face, but he was rolling his eyes in his heart. "You yourself said that it's a great merit. Why don't you repay me? Where's the generous repayment?" The generous repayment that Li Yi wanted did not come, but another old monk came. A familiar old monk. Several figures walked in from the entrance of the temple. Walking in front was the old monk who asked him for directions on the street yesterday. Beside him was the middle-aged monk with the metal rod. What was different from yesterday was that there were a few more young monks behind the 2 of them. Yesterday, the old monk was still going to Fahua Temple. Today, he came to Cold Mountain Temple. However, this was normal. It was said that the officials in the capital were of a higher rank. In fact, the temples in the capital were of a higher rank. All the monks in the world wanted to enter the temples in the capital. When foreign monks came, they would pay their respects. Cold Mountain Temple was the venue of the Water and Land Dharma Assembly. Recently, There were countless monks who came here. A monk from Cold Mountain Temple who was in charge of reception had already gone up to greet them. "May I know your title, master?" a young monk asked with a smile. The old monk in front of him had white eyebrows and beard, and an extraordinary bearing. It was obvious that he was an eminent monk. "I am Xian," the old monk said with a smile. "So it's Master Xian." The young monk had never heard of this Dharma name. A trace of doubt appeared on his face, but he still asked politely, "May I know where Master is from?" "Where I came from." The old monk still had a smile on his face. As soon as he said that, the young monk's expression changed. The welcoming monks behind him also trembled. Li looked at the old monk with some surprise. Almost everyone in his previous life knew that this was a powerful tool for showing off, but it actually appeared here? The smile on Master Tan Yin's face disappeared. He looked in the direction of the foreign monks and seemed to be deep in thought. Chapter 363. The old monk's words of "from where I came from" with a smile was like throwing a huge rock into a calm lake, causing the expressions of the monks of the Cold Mountain Temple to change at the same time. Recently, all the eminent monks from all over the world had gathered in the Cold Mountain Temple. The procedure to enter the temple was nothing more than to report the name of one's sect, the name of one's Buddhist name, and which temple one was practicing in. Those who were eminent monks would naturally be received by monks of a higher standard. Even a nameless monk would be properly accommodated. However, Master Xian's first words clearly told the monks of the Cold Mountain Temple that he was here to make trouble. Taking without asking was tantamount to stealing. Coming to discuss Zen without any prior notice was clearly an act of destroying the place and challenging the dojo. The young monk of the Cold Mountain Temple lacked experience after all. Faced with such a situation, he didn't know how to respond for a moment. What does "from where I came" mean? Princess Shanning's pretty face was filled with puzzlement. She felt that the monk's words were really profound and difficult to understand. "I don't know." Li shook his head. In order to prevent the old monk Tan Yin from undermining him again, he decided not to say anything else. Furthermore, when it came to Buddhist principles, everyone's comprehension was different. Perhaps that old monk called Xian just felt that no one could understand what he was saying, and it was very useful for showing off. Li had guessed wrong this time. Master Tan Yin did not have the time to tear down the stage, because the stage of Cold Mountain Temple was about to be torn down. The old monk Xian still had a smile on his face as he said, "I've heard that great Master Tan Yin of the Cold Mountain Temple has a profound understanding of the Dharma, and is an eminent monk of Buddhism. We've come from afar just to discuss the Dharma with the great master, and resolve the doubts in our hearts." Monk Tan Yin took a step forward and said with a smile, "Master, you have come from afar. Our Cold Mountain Temple naturally welcomes you. However, this is not a place to discuss Zen. Please move aside." It was the Water and Land Dharma Assembly, and there were many eminent monks from all over the world in the temple. It was common for them to discuss Zen and Buddhism with each other, but it had never been so direct, simple, and crude. Almost all the nobles in the capital had gathered here. If they lost, it would be a great loss to the reputation of the Cold Mountain Temple. Buddha is everywhere. When it comes to Zen, why should there be a distinction between regions? The foreign old monk shook his head and said. As soon as he said that, another uproar broke out among the monks of the Cold Mountain Temple. This was really not giving him any face at all. There were already a lot of people walking around the temple, and with Master Sandalwood Yin's ability to attract fans, many people gathered around in a short period of time. What's going on? Who is Master Tan Yin talking to? Could it be that the other party is also a Buddhist master? I don't know where he came from, but he just said that he wanted to discuss Zen with Master Tan Yin. An eminent monk discussing Zen? I can't miss this opportunity. It was a rare opportunity for an eminent monk to talk about Zen. Everyone was ready to watch the show. Li was also curious about how the Cold Mountain Temple would deal with the old monk who had made a scene. Another middle-aged monk had already walked forward and asked, "How do you want to discuss the Dharma?" Master Sandalwood Yin was the symbol of the Cold Mountain Temple. He could not afford to make any mistakes. If any monk could discuss Zen with him directly, he would probably only be able to do one thing in his life. If you want to discuss Zen, you must first meditate. Master Sandalwood Een is an eminent monk, so his meditation skills must be extraordinary. If I may be so bold, I would like to compete in meditation with Master Sandalwood Een. The middle-aged monk, who had been silent all this while, suddenly said, "What is meditation?" It was Princess Shanning's habit to ask whenever she did not understand. It's to see who can stay in a daze longer. Li gave a common explanation. In the journey to the west, Xuanzang from the kingdom of Qi fought with the 3 demons. One of them was to compete in meditation in the sky. This was a classic plot in the journey to the west. Art came from life, but it was higher than life. He did not expect to see such a scene in reality. Meditation was a monk's basic skill. This middle-aged monk wanted to compete with Master Sandalwood Een to see who could meditate longer, and compete to be the monk who could last the longest in the Jing kingdom. It was really bullying. One was a strong adult man, and the other was an old man with half a foot in the coffin. Wasn't it obvious who would last longer than the other? The master has to preside over the water and land Dharma assembly, and has no time to deal with miscellaneous matters. If you are here for this, please leave. Since the other party was here to make trouble, the monks of the Cold Mountain Temple did not need to be polite. They did not even have the intention to invite these monks for a cup of tea. I heard that the Cold Mountain Temple of the Jing Kingdom is a holy land of Buddhism, and Master Sandalwood Een is an eminent monk. We have come from afar. Is this how you treat your guests? A young monk who came with the old monk suddenly said, "What, the Cold Mountain Temple of the Jing Kingdom? These monks are not from the Jing Kingdom? Monks from other countries dare to make trouble at the Dharma assembly. Drag them out and beat them to death." If they were monks from the Jing Kingdom, the crowd would not mind watching a wonderful discussion of Zen. After all, this kind of thing was not common. However, since they were not monks from the Jing Kingdom, and were here to make trouble, they immediately gave up the idea. This kind of guy with bad intentions should be dragged out and beaten to death. Today, the temple was full of high-ranking officials and nobles, and there were many guards with them. Immediately, a few people walked toward the monks. The young monk knew that he had said something wrong. Seeing this, his expression changed slightly. The middle-aged monk with the iron rod stood in front of the old monk expressionlessly. He gave off a dangerous aura. "Wait." An old monk from the Cold Mountain Temple waved his hand. The Water and Land Dharma Assembly was originally to invite eminent monks from all over the world. Even if they were monks from other countries, if they were beaten to death in the Cold Mountain Temple, the reputation of the Cold Mountain Temple would be tarnished. The old monk looked at the middle-aged monk and said, "All living things are empty. There is no enlightenment, no confusion, no holiness, no mortality, no giving, no receiving, no joy, no anger, and no Zen. Winning is also empty, and losing is also empty. What else do you want to discuss?" "What do you mean, Master?" Some people were confused. Among the surrounding believers, there were still some who knew Buddhist scriptures. They immediately gave an explanation to what the old monk had just said. Only then did the crowd come to a realization. They looked at the few foreign monks with playful eyes. "Didn't you want to discuss Zen? Now the Buddhists say that joy and anger are empty. Even Zen is empty. What else do you have to discuss? What else do you want to discuss?" The middle-aged monk was expressionless. Under the crowd's mocking gaze, he suddenly stretched out his hand and gave the old monk a hard slap on the face. "Stop. How dare you?" Seeing this scene, the surrounding monks of the Cold Mountain Temple could not sit still. They surrounded the middle-aged monk and glared at him. The old monk was also slapped. His face was burning with pain. When he came to his senses, he also looked at him angrily. After a short moment of shock, the crowd's gazes also became unfriendly. Not only did he come to disrupt the Dharma assembly, but a monk from another country actually dared to make a move on the territory of the Jing Kingdom. He did not want to go back today. "It's over. This monk has some skills," Li could not help but say. "Why?" Princess Shanning looked up at him. Li sighed and explained. "Just now, the master said that he was neither happy nor angry. Look at his expression now." Princess Shanning turned her head in confusion. She immediately saw the old monk's angry face and immediately understood. Even he could not do what he said. Naturally, it did not count. Those who did not understand the reason for the incident heard Li Yi's explanation and came to their senses. The way they looked at the monks changed. Chapter 364. The old monk of the cold mountain temple said a seemingly powerful Buddhist phrase to break the stalemate, but unexpectedly, he was defeated by the middle-aged monk's slap. Not only was he slapped by the middle-aged monk, but he was also slapped by himself. Just a moment ago, he was saying neither joy nor anger, and the next moment he was glaring at the monk. Contradicting himself, the old monk with profound Buddhist teachings was defeated. Even the old monk was no match for the monk, let alone the young monk. He even forcibly held back the anger on his face. These monks are not simple. They must have come for the water and land Dharma assembly. Let's see how the cold mountain temple will deal with it. Why hasn't Master Sandine made a move yet? The monks of the Jing kingdom were slapped in the face by the foreign monks. As the people of the Jing kingdom, they naturally did not look good. This was no longer about the face of the cold mountain temple. It was enough to rise to the height of national honor. Obviously, as the dignitaries of the capital, these people present were the ones with the strongest national pride. At this moment, no one said anything about dragging these monks out and beating them to death. The Water and Land Dharma assembly held by the Cold Mountain Temple was not only aimed at the monks of the Jing kingdom, but also very welcoming of the friendly foreign monks. If they really dragged them out and beat them to death, wouldn't it mean that their side was afraid? Even if they could shut up one or two people, could they shut up all the people present? If this matter was spread out, the reputation that the Cold Mountain Temple had accumulated over the years would also be destroyed. Therefore, at this moment, what everyone was most looking forward to was that Master Sandine could really defeat these foreign monks with ulterior motives in terms of Buddhist teachings. The old monk had been provoking them for a while, and more people gathered around. Coincidentally, the preaching in a Buddhist hall ended, and the crowd came out. Seeing the situation here, they gathered here with puzzled hearts. Li Xian and Emingzu also came to Li Yi's side, surrounded by more than 10 guards, vigilantly watching everything around them. What's going on? Li Xian glanced at the monks in the middle who were arguing with each other, and asked in confusion. Li Yi gestured to the crowd. Let's continue watching. Li Yi did not say anything, but Princess Shaning excitedly recounted what had just happened. She felt that listening to these monks talk was much more interesting than staying in the palace all day listening to the lectures of those old teachers. Of course, Mr. Mathematician was an exception. The sadhu of the Qi kingdom, Emingzu said. What? Li Yi looked back at her. That man is an ascetic monk from the Qi kingdom. Emingzu looked at the middle-aged monk with the iron rod in his hand and said slowly, holding an iron rod in his hand and shaving his eyebrows, he is undoubtedly an ascetic monk. Only the Qi kingdom has such monks. If these monks were monks from the Qi kingdom, it would make sense that they were here to cause trouble. This was a racial hatred. Buddhism had no borders, but monks did. The monks of the Qi kingdom and the Jing kingdom had always been at odds. At this moment, the old monk from the Cold Mountain Temple who had spoken earlier had already retreated in shame. The old monk, Xian, smiled and looked at Master Sandanian and asked, "What is Buddha?" He dares to challenge Master Sandanian to Buddha. He really overestimates himself. Master Sandanian has profound dharma. This old monk will definitely lose. What is Buddha? He actually asked such a simple question. I'm afraid any monk can answer it. The crowd was still very confident in Master Sandanian. After all, the title of a virtuous monk did not come from nowhere. Even His Majesty had personally acknowledged it. How could the Master's dharma be fake? However, unlike what the crowd had imagined, they did not see the scene of Master Sandanian defeating the foreign monk in a few sentences. After the old monk had asked this question for a long time, Master Sandanian still did not speak. Why isn't Master Sandanian speaking? The crowd began to wonder. Is this question difficult to answer? Master can't Seeing Master Sandanyan's expression, some people looked doubtful. What is Buddha? It was normal for them to not be able to answer this question. Master Sandanyan would not be able to answer it either. He was a virtuous monk. Monk, why make things difficult for other monks? Li sighed. Although he did not understand Dharma, he was experienced and knowledgeable. There were many traps in this kind of question. He could not let the other party take the initiative at all. Otherwise, if he was not careful, the other party would seize the initiative. At this time, Master Sandanyan's approach was the wisest. I can't say it, I can't say it. It's all wrong. Li muttered softly. Li Mingzhu raised her head and looked at him in surprise. This sentence, no matter how she looked at it, didn't seem to come out of his mouth. What can't be said? When the Tsundara Lolita heard this, the expression on her face became even more puzzled. Some of the people around who were familiar with Dharma also heard Li Yi's words and nodded in agreement. Just as the young man had said, Master Sandanyan could not answer this question. As long as he opened his mouth, he would be greeted by the other party's relentless pursuit. Li Yi was standing next to Master Sandanyan. Although his voice was soft, it did not escape the other party's ears. He turned his head slightly to look at Li Yi. This was the second time he had heard this sentence from him, and it was the same as what he was thinking. Why isn't Master Sandanyan speaking? Monk Xian smiled. It was wrong to say it, but it was also wrong not to say it. Countless people were thinking, why don't we drag these monks out and beat them to death? Princess Shaning could not help but tug at Li Yi's sleeve and asked, why isn't Master Sandanyan speaking? Does he not know the answer? What is Buddha? A child's heart was very simple and pure. She did not know what the conversation between the two old monks meant. She was just curious about the answer to the question. Curiosity was something that children of this age did not lack, even if she was a princess. She did not ask Li Xian or Emingzu because in her eyes, the teacher should be omniscient, just like his father. Looking at the little girl's inquisitive eyes, Li Yi could not say the word, I don't know. He patted her head and whispered, Master Sandanyan is a highly virtuous monk. How could he not know the answer to this question? It's just that the master is an expert. If he were to say the answer directly, wouldn't he be no different from those ordinary people? Li Yi's voice was very soft and could only be heard in a small area. However, as soon as he opened his mouth, the people around him turned to look at him. After all, the person who could say that just now was not a simple person. Moreover, they also wanted to know why he would say such a thing. Could it be that he really understood Master Sandanyan's meaning? Then how did the teacher know? Princess Shaning was even more curious. The master did not say it, so how did the teacher know what he was thinking? What did the monk ask Master Sandanyan just now? Li Yi asked with a smile. What is Buddha? Princess Shaning said immediately. Look, although Master Sandanyan did not speak just now, he looked at me, looked at you, looked at the people around us, but thinking about that question, it is not difficult to understand. He actually wanted to say that you are Buddha, I am Buddha, and all living beings are Buddha. As a teacher of mathematics, Li Yi fulfilled his responsibility as a teacher of Buddhism very well. If Princess Shaning had such a teacher. There was an eminent monk in the former Tang dynasty who said that without enlightenment, Buddha is all living beings. When one is enlightened, all living beings are Buddha. In fact, it means that everyone has Buddha nature, but it is covered by the mortal world. This is what Master Sandanyan wants to tell us. Master Sandanyan is indeed an eminent monk. He can actually demonstrate Buddhist etiquette invisibly. I admire him. So that's how it is. The little girl nodded as if she understood. She could not say it, indeed could not say it. After the teacher said it, she was actually even more confused. So that's how it is. A man in embroidered clothes behind Li Yi was suddenly enlightened. Another person's face was full of joy. No wonder Master Sandanyan looked at me just now. All living beings are Buddha. So I also have Buddha nature? Ah, I understand. So that's what the master meant. Several people exclaimed. I am guilty. I actually doubted Master Sandanyan just now. I am guilty. A person said repeatedly with a face full of remorse. Every move is Buddhist. This is a master. The crowd could not help but exclaim. Master Sandanyan was indeed an eminent monk of his generation. After being seen through, he could still maintain a calm expression. He smiled and glanced at Li Yi. Was that what he meant? Was that really what he meant? Yes, if young benefactor Li Yi said so, then so be it. The one who knows me is young benefactor Li Yi. Chapter 365. All living beings are Buddhas. You and I are Buddhas. Master has already told us the answer. So that's what Master Tanin meant when he looked at us just now. With the reminder of the handsome young man, everyone finally understood Master Tanyin's deep meaning. The master was indeed a master, able to demonstrate Buddhist principles to an intangible level. They couldn't help but admire him deeply. Of course, the few people who had doubts about Master Tan just now regretted it so much that their intestines turned green. This was disrespectful to Master Tan and also to Buddha. After they went back, they must donate more incense money to wash away their sins. As for the handsome young man who had high attainments in Buddhist Dharma, he naturally won the favor of everyone. They didn't know which family this young man came from. The younger generation will surpass the older generation. The monks of Cold Mountain Temple were overjoyed. With Li Yi's reminder, they immediately remembered which eminent monk of the former Tang dynasty had said that sentence. It was the wise words of the sixth patriarch, and the foreign monks couldn't refute it. Because to refute this sentence was to refute the sixth patriarch, and to refute themselves. The monks had all heard of this sentence, but they didn't expect it to be able to answer that question. They sighed in their hearts. Compared to this young benefactor, their cultivation was still not enough. Some people were happy, some people were sad. The monks of Cold Mountain Temple were happy, but the expressions of the young monks of the Qi Kingdom suddenly changed. They didn't expect that they would be able to solve the problem so quickly, and in such an incredible way. This was like going for wool and coming home shorn. It didn't stump the monks of Cold Mountain Temple, but helped them become famous. All living beings are Buddhas. Master Tanin, you really live up to your reputation. Old monk Xian had a smile on his face all along, but when he spoke, he looked at Li Yi with an inexplicable gaze. As for the monk with the iron rod, who Emingzu called a sadhu, his expression was as calm as ever. Master really means this? Li Xian looked at Li Yi suspiciously. He did not believe that Li Yi had the ability to read minds, nor did he believe that Master Tanin really thought so. He only believed that with Li Yi's mouth, he could turn black into white and wrong into right. He had a deep understanding of what the monk meant by renouncing asceticism. Is that important? Li Yi glanced at him and whispered. Is it not important? Is it important? Is it not important? Son-in-law. While Li Yi and Li Xian were debating about philosophy, an exclamation suddenly came from the opposite side of the crowd. Xiao Huan was holding a paper bag in her hand, carefully squeezing through the crowd. Walking up to Li Yi, he happily waved the paper bag in his hand and said, "Son-in-law, try this. This is the flour cake I just bought outside. It's delicious." Li Yi pinched a piece and put it in his mouth. Although the taste was not as good as Ruoqing's, it was still passable. He looked at Xiao Huan and asked, "Why are you here alone? Where is Miss?" "Miss is accompanying the old madam to listen to the master's sermon." "I sneaked out alone," the little servant girl said happily. "I will go find them now and tell them that the master has also come." She wanted to hurry back, but because she was in too much of a hurry, she accidentally dropped the paper bag in her hand. The pastries scattered all over the ground, and a few pieces even landed on the shoes of the old monk, Xian, who was closest to her. Sorry. She hurriedly crouched down to pick them up. Just as she was about to pick up a piece that had fallen by the monk's feet, a stern expression suddenly appeared on the monk's face. He shouted in a low voice, "Go away!" Finishing, he lifted his foot and kicked the little servant girl. Clang! At the same time, a palace guard felt the long knife at his waist suddenly leave its sheath. A flash of knife light shot out and headed straight for the monk's thigh. The monk could still kick the little servant girl away, but the price would be one of his legs. Whether this was a good deal or not, It could be understood just by thinking about it. In the next moment, he did not hesitate to pull his foot back. Li Yi helped the little servant girl up and threw the knife in his hand to the guard. He looked at the monk of the Qi kingdom with a cold gaze. The monk hates women the most. He does not like women to get close to him. Emingzu came forward to explain. This sudden scene interrupted Master Tan Yin and Ji Xian's affectionate gaze. The surrounding people's gazes also temporarily shifted over. Du Nan, do not be rude. Ji Xian spoke up to stop the middle-aged monk who was holding the iron rod tightly. Is this all your Buddha has taught you? Li Yi asked the monk with narrowed eyes. The surrounding people also understood what had just happened, and the atmosphere became a little noisy. That monk actually dared to commit murder here. It's better to drag him out and beat him to death to avoid being an eyesore. After someone made a suggestion, it was unanimously agreed by everyone. Who are you? The middle-aged monk's eyes were filled with violence as he asked in a low voice. You don't know who I am? Li Yi looked at him and did not hide the coldness in his eyes. Why would I? The middle-aged monk had just said these 3 words when Ji Xian suddenly stepped in front of him and stopped him from continuing. Ji Xian's expression finally changed. He looked up at Li Yi and said slowly, I did not expect there to be such a powerful person in the Jing kingdom. I was blind and did not recognize a master. May I ask, young benefactor, who are you? What are they talking about? The proud girl's face was filled with confusion as she looked up at Li Xian and asked. I don't know. Li Xian shook his head. His mind was also a mess. However, there was one thing he was very clear about. This group of foreign monks was probably not going to have it easy this time. The expression on Li Mingzhu's face was also puzzled. One of the masters who taught her martial arts was an eminent Buddhist monk. Under the influence of what she saw and heard, although she couldn't say that she was well versed in Buddhism, she had some foundation. However, she was still confused by the conversation between Li Yi and the old monk. It wasn't just Shou Ning and Li Xian. Everyone present had a blank look on their faces. Once again, they felt like their IQ wasn't enough. That young man had clearly only asked a question that could not be any more ordinary. How did he become a mighty figure and an expert? Was there something wrong with the old monk with the Buddhist name of Ji Xian? When they looked at Master Tan Yin, they found that the master seemed to have fallen into deep thought. Could it be that there was really something profound about that question? Everyone could not help but have this thought. They turned around and looked at each other. They could see the confusion in each other's eyes. This young benefactor's understanding of Buddhism has probably reached another level. At this moment, the old monk who was slapped back by the sadhu said softly, Master, what do they mean? Just as everyone was scratching their heads, someone finally appeared who understood. The old monk's shiny head suddenly became the focus of the crowd. Amitabha. The old monk chanted the name of Buddha and explained. The question young benefactor asked just now was, who am I? It seems simple, but it actually contains great wisdom. The I in the question is not the I that we think. To answer this question, we must first jump out of the I and look at everything around us with a detached heart. Therefore, this question young benefactor asked is extremely difficult to answer. And Master Ji Xian's question of, who are you, is also similar to this question. Hearing the old monk's words, everyone was stunned. The expression on their faces was even more confused than before. Who am I? I am me, I am not me. Jump out of the I. Motherf asterisk her, who am I? He was a master after all. With just a few words, he made them doubt their lives. They still did not understand what the crux of the question was. However, they finally understood one thing. This young man's dharma was very profound, so profound that they couldn't see through it at all. The old monk named Ji Xian couldn't answer the question he had asked just now. So he beat around the bush and kicked the question back at him. Can't this foreign monk have some shame? In an instant, everyone looked at monk Ji Xian with incomparable contempt. Chapter 366. For a normal person, who am I? Was not a question at all. If they asked it in public, they might be arrested as a lunatic. But for a small group of people, this was the first question of the 3 ultimate philosophical questions in the world. This small group of people included philosophers and monks, especially eminent monks of great virtue. Who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? This question had troubled philosophers for thousands of years without a conclusion, so how could a monk answer it? Who am I? Li Yi smiled and said, I am just an ordinary citizen of the Jing kingdom. At this moment, Li Yi had replaced Master Tan Yin and become the focus of the crowd. Therefore, every word he said attracted the attention of the crowd. An ordinary citizen of the Jing kingdom. What Buddhist principles does this sentence contain? I don't know, but it's definitely not as simple as we think. Master, quickly explain, what does this sentence mean? The old monk from the cold mountain temple, who was acting as a translator, shook his head helplessly. Regarding the question just now, this young benefactor had clearly changed his concept and did not give a direct answer. Or did he not understand the deeper meaning behind it? The old monk sighed inwardly. His attainments in the Dharma were still insufficient, so he simply kept his mouth shut. The old monk Xian sighed and said, An ordinary citizen of the Jing kingdom has such attainments. The capital is indeed a place of hidden dragons and crouching tigers. Li Yi ignored the old monk. He picked up the pastries on the ground, wrapped them in paper, and threw them into the garbage bucket at the side. He patted the shoulders of the obviously frightened servant girl and asked, Are you all right? Son-in-law, I'm fine. Xiao Huan raised her head to look at Li Yi and said with a smile, I don't care which country you are from. If you dare to cause trouble again, you will be dragged out and beaten to death. No one will help you. Li Yi said coldly as he looked at the group of foreign monks. Shouldn't monks be diligently cultivating Buddhism to deliver all living beings from suffering? To fight for power and profit and cause trouble in other monasteries? Did they really think that they could become masters just because they shaved their heads? Master Tan Yin took a step forward and stood shoulder to shoulder with Li Yi, saying, Cold Mountain Temple's water and land assembly, everyone who comes is a guest. If you have other intentions, please go back to where you came from. Even Master Tan Yin had stood up, so there was naturally no need for everyone to be patient. That's right. How dare a foreign monk behave atrociously in the land of our Jing kingdom? Are you courting death? You can't even win against a master in terms of Zen, and you still have the face to stand here? Scram if you know what's good for you. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. Not only did the foreign monk Luanfo who came to make a scene not talk about great Master Tan Yin, he couldn't even be compared to an ordinary young man of their Jing state. If he made any more outrageous moves, the nobles present might really do something. We're here to discuss Zen and cultivate Buddhism. Is this the attitude of your Cold Mountain Temple? What a famous temple in the Jing kingdom. It's just SOSO. A young monk behind the old monk Xian said angrily. The Buddha is not broken. Cultivate yourselves first. Li Yi said faintly. Only he would waste his time talking to these monks. If it were Miss Lu, she would have cut off his head with her sword and kicked him around like a ball, just based on what the monk with the iron rod had done just now. His words made the young monk choke and speechless. Master Tan Yin and the old monk of the Cold Mountain Temple looked surprised. The people around them were stunned for a moment. When they came back to their senses, they all exclaimed, Buddha isn't broken. Cultivate yourselves first? Wonderful, truly wonderful. This young man's attainments in Buddhism are indeed profound. Well said, foreign monk. Go back and cultivate yourselves first. As soon as Li Yi said this, everyone applauded. The other party said that they should discuss Zen and cultivate Buddhism, but the next moment he said, Buddha isn't broken. Cultivate yourselves first. Seeing the foreign monk being defeated, everyone felt extremely happy. What foreign monk? How dare he come to the Cold Mountain Temple to cause trouble? Master Tan Yin and the real monks didn't even do much, but they all fell to the hands of a young man who wasn't even a monk. How could they still be called monks? Cultivate Buddhism, cultivate Buddhism. This cultivation is not the cultivation of others. Young benefactor, you're too stubborn. Monk Xian said with a kind expression. Master, you keep talking about cultivating Buddhism. Tell me, what is Buddha? Li looked at him and asked. They were the ones who provoked them first. If they didn't teach them a lesson, they would really think that they were easy to bully. Everyone secretly applauded. This was giving them a taste of their own medicine. The old monk's question was also kicked back to him. What is Buddha? They wanted to see how the old monk would answer. Amitba. Monk Xian chanted and said, Buddha is wisdom, virtue and compassion. You are Buddha, I am Buddha, all living beings are Buddha, Buddha is everywhere, and Buddha is omnipotent. Shameless. Isn't that what this young man said just now? Plagiarism. This is blatant plagiarism. This old monk is too shameless. Hearing Monk Xian's answer, everyone was filled with righteous indignation. They all spoke up and condemned this shameless plagiarism. Buddha is everywhere? Li suddenly asked. Buddha is everywhere, the old monk answered. Buddha is omnipotent. Li asked again. Buddha is omnipotent, the old monk answered again. If that's the case. Li crossed his arms and looked at him. He said slowly, Can your Buddha create a stone that he can't move? Old monk Xian moved his lips as if he wanted to speak, but then he fell silent. Master Tanin frowned and seemed to be deep in thought, leaving the confused crowd behind. Why isn't the monk talking? Is he also invisibly demonstrating the Dharma? Can Buddha create a stone that he can't move? Of course he can. Buddha is omnipotent. Idiot. Since Buddha is omnipotent, why can't he move a stone? Oh, I understand. Buddha can't create a stone that he can't move. Idiot. Since Buddha is omnipotent, why can't he create a stone that he can't move? Who are you calling an idiot? I dare you to say it again. Idiot. Ignoring the two people fighting outside, everyone looked shocked. When they looked at the young man inside, they suddenly felt like they were looking up to a great mountain. How did he come up with this question? This was simply not giving the old monk a way out. No matter what he said, it would be wrong unless he took back what he said and admitted that Buddha was not omnipotent. But was this something a monk could say? He had actually sent all the foreign monks to their deaths with just his mouth. This was a master, a true master. While everyone was thinking about how Buddha could move the stone, Li had already passed through the crowd with the young maidservant and left. The question, can Buddha create a stone that he can't move, was adapted from a famous paradox in another world called God's paradox. God's paradox meant, God is not omnipotent. The Vatican in another world published a book that used the most popular mathematical deduction at the time to conclude that God is omnipotent. At this time, a wise man asked tit for tat, can God create a stone that he can't move? So this wise man was in big trouble. Regardless of whether this story was true or false, and regardless of whether this wise man was eventually tied to a pillar and burned to death, a paradox was a paradox because it could never have an answer, unless the original hypothesis was overturned. Obviously, it was a hypothesis that old monk Xian could not overturn. Therefore, for a long time to come, he would be trapped in this paradox and unable to extricate himself. Chapter 367. We have troubled you. Please don't blame us, Master Tanin. I'll take my leave. Master Xian left, and so did the monks from the Qi kingdom. They had no choice but to leave. They had come to talk about Zen and Buddhism, but if they ended up renouncing asceticism, it would be the biggest joke in the world. Before the middle-aged monk with the iron rod left, he scanned the crowd with his gaze before leaving expressionlessly. They had come aggressively and confidently, but when they left, they were crestfallen and looked a little embarrassed, as if they were fleeing. Master, you have a profound dharma. I admire you. Master Tanin accepted the worship of the crowd as a matter of course. Among all the monks in the world, who could demonstrate Buddhist etiquette invisibly, presumably after today, Master Tanin's reputation in Buddhism would reach a new peak. Hey, where's that young man? Someone suddenly asked in confusion. When it came to defeating the foreign monk, that young man deserved the most credit. His words made everyone feel a little dizzy even now when they thought about it. He left. He just left, someone said, pointing in a certain direction. I wonder which family he is from. He is proficient in Dharma and has a deep affinity with Buddhism. He can be said to be an outstanding talent among the younger generation, someone said with a sigh. I know who he is. Tell us quickly. The crowd curiously gathered around a man in embroidered clothes. Although you haven't seen him, you should have heard of his name. The man in embroidered clothes said. He is the eldest grandson of the Li family who has been in the limelight recently. His calligraphy is better than Zhao Chun's, and he was conferred the title of Chong, and county magistrate by His Majesty. After being reminded by the man in embroidered clothes, the crowd immediately thought of something. The eldest grandson of the Li family was also a well-known figure in the capital recently. He was the only viscount conferred by His Majesty for many years. It was said that he was very close to Prince Ning's son and the princess. It was also said that he had a close relationship with Master Tan Yin. No wonder. He had such a profound dharma, so it was not strange that he was friends with Master Tan Yin. The foreign monks came and left quickly. In fact, they did not cause much of a commotion. Most people did not know about it. After the crowd dispersed, the water and land ritual assembly continued according to the proper procedure. The monks of the cold mountain temple breathed a sigh of relief. Those who should leave had finally left. Today was a special day. If there was any trouble, they would be laughed at by the world. The old monk repeatedly instructed the little monk guarding the door that if any other monks came, he must ask them about their background, and not let anything like what happened just now happen again. That young benefactor really helped us this time, the old monk said with some lingering fear. The other party had come with ill intentions, and with their methods, even Master Tan Yin was somewhat unable to withstand them. If the young benefactor had not stood up to help them from the beginning, they would have been the ones in a difficult situation today. Master Tan Yin was silent for a moment before saying, entertain the Li family's old madam and the Li family members well. Do not neglect them. Then he walked into the quiet room. About it. Li Mastert. Tant Mastert. Tan Yins. T. Li was not a philosopher, nor was he an eminent monk. Therefore, it was rare for him to be in a situation where his thoughts were not clear. Li Xian was not a philosopher. He was not a monk of great virtue, so he could not go around as he pleased. Li Xian went to meet up with his heir's concubine. His father-in-law also had elders present, so he couldn't wander around as he pleased. Li Emingzu stood at the side and said, it's all thanks to you this time. Otherwise, the cold mountain temple would have been humiliated by the monks of the Qi kingdom. If this got out, our Jing kingdom would have lost face too. Then he asked, when did you start practicing Buddhism? I don't know anything about Buddhism. It's easy to talk to these monks. When you can't even understand what you're saying, you can scare them. Li Yi said casually. Those monks of great virtue were not normal people. If he wanted to talk to them normally, he had to become abnormal first. Emingzi thought about it and said, we are like fire and water with the Qi kingdom. They are afraid of God's law. They won't act rashly on the surface, but they will definitely take action in other ways. What happened just now is an example. I don't know what else they will do. The monks of the Qi kingdom have always been different from Buddhism. They are loyal to the royal family. If they target you, it will be troublesome. You have to be more careful. What a pity. You were born a girl. Li Yi sighed. What do you mean? Emingzu raised her eyebrows and asked. Li Yi said, if you were a prince and could become the emperor in the future, the Jing kingdom would be governed well by you. Emingzi didn't say anything. Even though she was a prince, she didn't want to be the emperor. She just wanted to see the Li dynasty prosper. That was all. It's good to be a princess. There's nothing to pity, she said, shaking her head. Li Yi glanced at her. His gaze lingered on a certain tall and straight spot. He nodded and said, it's good to be a princess. How are we going to explain this to the third prince? Outside the cold mountain temple, a young monk said with a bitter expression. The old monk, Ji Xian, looked at the sky in the distance and said nothing. Bang! The monk named Du Nan slammed his iron rod on the ground, causing mud to fly everywhere. The iron rod sank deep into the ground. If that person hadn't interfered, How could the monks of the cold mountain temple defeat us? Du Nan's expression was ferocious. He didn't look like a monk at all. He said coldly, "As long as Tan agrees to compete with me in meditation, his reputation will be ruined after he loses. No one will believe him. How can he be a monk then? At that time, our people will successfully take over the cold mountain temple. In time, we will definitely unify the Buddhism in the Jing kingdom. No matter who spoils the third prince's plan, they will go to Avicii hell." The few young monks quietly kept a distance from the sadhu. Although they were all monks, the sadhu was clearly an extremely paranoid pervert. If it was not necessary, they would never want to deal with such a person for the rest of their lives. Amitba. Now that the third prince is here, I will give him an explanation. The old monk, Gxian, looked defeated. On one side was the country, and on the other was his faith. How to choose was even more difficult for him than the question of whether Buddha was omnipotent. Old monk Gxian took a deep look at the middle-aged monk before he slowly walked down the mountain. The few young monks hurriedly followed him. The middle-aged sadhu looked back into the temple. A hint of darkness flashed across his face. He pulled out his iron rod and walked in another direction. Chapter 368. Once a person has obtained great material satisfaction, they will turn to pursue other things in order to achieve spiritual satisfaction. The nobles in the capital city were at the top of the society. They did not need to worry about food and clothing, so they would worry about other things. They worried about the past life, the present life, and the next life. Therefore, they came here on the first day of the Water and Land Dharma Assembly in the Cold Mountain Temple, to listen to the preaching of the eminent monks. They hoped to release the sufferings of the past, and avoid falling into the hungry ghost realm, or the hell realm in their next life, so that they could be reincarnated into a good family. Old Madam was worried about when she could hold a great-grandson in her arms, so she dragged Ru-Yi to various temples. After listening to the Avatamsaka Sutra and the Sarangama Sutra, after listening to the Sarangama Sutra and the Diamond Sutra, only Ru-Yi's temperament could calm down. Second Miss Lu had long left the organization. She found Li Yi and Xiao Huan and drank tea in a quiet meditation room in the backyard. The little monk of the Cold Mountain Temple was very polite to Li Yi. He just wanted to find a quiet place to rest, so the little monk brought them here. The surroundings were so quiet that they could not hear the noise outside at all. The tea was also good tea. It was fragrant and had a lingering aftertaste. In addition to the excellent attitude, he also received a gift from the Cold Mountain Temple. A wooden tablet the size of half a palm emerged from his chest. The wooden tablet was purple and slightly heavy in his hand. There were several blooming lotus flowers carved on the front, emitting a faint fragrance. It looked like sandalwood. Sandalwood was precious, but such a small piece could not be sold for much money. The old monk was too stingy, and the Cold Mountain Temple was not particular either. They gave them scriptures and helped them to repel the enemy, but they only gave them such a small wooden tablet. It was not sincere. If the little monk did not say that this wooden tablet could be used in any temple in the Jing kingdom, he would have thrown it to Shanning to play with. The sun was shining brightly outside, and the tea in the meditation room was strong. Mississippi Lu was also quiet, which was rare. She quietly sat opposite Li Yi and drank tea. The extremely friendly attitude of the monks made her a little embarrassed to ask them to compare martial arts. Xiao Huan was bragging about Li Yi's great feats. With just a few words, she had rendered the foreign monk who had come to cause trouble speechless. Lu Rui looked up. It was no wonder she had heard quite a number of people discussing Chang'an County on her way here. She had not realized it back then, and only now did she realize who they were talking about. To Li Yi, there wasn't much to see in the Water and Land Spell Assembly. If he hadn't been dragged out by Li Xian in the morning, he would have been comfortably basking in the sun at home. This spell assembly would last for a full 7 days. From the looks of it, the old mistress didn't seem to have any intention of going back in the near future. Li Yi decided to go back with Xiao Huan and the others first. He would take advantage of these few days to prepare for his lessons. He would compress all the content he had to say in a few days, and let them digest it slowly. In this way, he would have enough time to deal with the affairs of Qing and prefecture and have a perfect honeymoon. The tea in Cold Mountain Temple was good. Before he left, he asked the little monk to pack 2 caddies of tea. Seeing the pained look on his face, he had a deeper understanding of Cold Mountain Temple's stinginess. The little monk wanted to cry but had no tears as he watched Li Yi leave. If not for the abbot's instructions, such tea would not be used to entertain guests. It should be known that a few days ago, even the Prime Minister couldn't get 1 caddy of tea to taste. That was 2 caddies. Just now, the foreign monk came to make trouble and wanted to discuss Zen with Master Tanin. It's such a pity that you didn't see the scene. What? There was such a thing? Of course. That old monk asked Master Tanin what is Buddha. Guess what Master Tanin said? Master Tanin didn't say anything. He just, what a good way to demonstrate Buddhism invisibly. I'm afraid ordinary people like us can't reach Master Tanin's realm in our lifetime. Not to mention Master Tanin, I'll be very satisfied if I can reach the realm of the son of Chang and County in my lifetime. What son of Chang and County? The discussion of Zen just now was very exciting. Not only did everyone see what it meant to demonstrate Buddhist principles invisibly, but they also witnessed a young man defeating a Buddhist master with just a few words. As they chatted, they soon had new topics to talk about. Even who am I? Who am I? Can Buddha create a stone that he can't lift himself? Became the most discussed questions among them. The popularity of His Majesty's title of nobility had not died down yet. The 4 words son of Chang and County appeared frequently in their ears. Now there was another wave of enthusiasm on the original basis. The king of Shu and a few young talents stood under a plum tree. He smiled and said, "This son of Chang and County is also an extraordinary person. If there's a chance, I must get to know him." A young man standing behind the king of Shu hesitated for a moment and said, "Your Highness, actually, you've met the son of Chang and County just now." Chun Liqing found it hard to describe his current feelings. It had only been a few days. How did he become the son of Chang and County? Wasn't he supposed to be a talent with no background in Qing and prefecture? Even Duke Chen's mansion was quite afraid of him. When the young master of the mansion was bullied, they didn't even come to question him. Instead, they strictly ordered everyone not to have any conflicts with the Li family. Oh, the king of Shu looked at him, and a trace of doubt appeared on his face. He asked, "I saw him just now. When?" Chun Liqing had also successfully hooked up with the king of Shu in recent days. Hearing this, he didn't dare to be negligent. He immediately replied, "The person standing beside the crown prince of King Ning, Li Xian, is the son of Chang and County Li Yi. So it's him." The king of Shu narrowed his eyes. He had long heard that the son of Chang and County had a close relationship with Li Xian. However, he didn't expect that the person just now was the son of Chang and County, that his father, the emperor, had made an exception to confer. Others didn't know the details of this son of Chang and County. They just thought that he was lucky to be favored by the emperor. However, as a prince, he knew some secrets about him. Every single thing that he had done could be said to be earth-shattering, especially the heavenly punishment. Although he did not know what it was, he knew that it was the heavenly punishment that had played a role in their victory in the war against the Qi kingdom. It could make the Jing kingdom stronger and defeat the Qi kingdom. What kind of weapon was it? This was also the reason why his father, the emperor, valued him so much. If he also had such a help, he wouldn't have to worry about not being able to achieve great things. He was the son of imperial concubine Shui, and was the prince with the highest chance of inheriting the throne. He was knowledgeable and well-versed in both the literary and military arts. He had a wide circle of friends, and many of the young talents of the noble families in the capital followed his lead. His background was deep, and not only did he have the support of the powerful Chui family, but many of the senior members of the court were also his supporters. Countless people, including himself, believed that he would be the next emperor of the Jing kingdom. However, the current emperor didn't seem to think so. The crown prince hadn't been appointed yet, and the eastern palace was empty. As time went by, he became more and more uneasy. He wanted to control more resources, so that after his father passed away, no one could stop him from ascending the throne. He had never doubted his father's judgment. The fact that the emperor valued the son of Chang and county so much meant that there must be something that the emperor valued. Similarly, he also valued it. He was the dignified king of Shu, the next monarch of the Jing kingdom. As for Li Xian, he was just a crown prince. Smart people should be able to distinguish which one was more important. Chapter 369. Li Yi and the other two came out of the meditation room and walked out of the cold mountain temple, ready to go home. Along the way, they heard many people talking about what just happened. Li Yi was actually not willing to be in the limelight. The monk with the iron rod was too much of a bully. A foreign monk dared to be so arrogant in the land of the Jing kingdom. Of course, the most important thing was that Xiao Huan was involved. If that bastard had not dodged so quickly, he would have lost a leg. The family's carriage and the Li residences were parked together. He told the coachman to inform the old mistress and Rui. Li Yi, Rui, and Xiao Huan went back first. As long as it was not on the city's green stone slabs, the carriage was a kind of torture. The carriage slowly went down the mountain path, shaking violently. Li Yi did not forget the suffering he and Li Xian suffered when they went up the mountain, so he decided to go down the stone steps. The carriage from the residence would wait for them at the foot of the mountain. The Cold Mountain Temple's Water and Land Conference was originally very lively, but today was a special event for the dignitaries. The path that ordinary believers took was even less crowded than usual. Wait a minute. Li Yi was educating Xiao Huan about the bodhisattva's gender. The little servant girl's mouth was in an O shape because she found out that the bodhisattva was a man. Mississippi Lu suddenly stopped and whispered. Li Yi stopped in his tracks and turned to look at her. Who is it? Come out. Mississippi Lu walked in front of Li Yi and Xiao Huan and said lightly. Under Li Yi's surprised gaze, a figure walked out of the dense forest in front of them. It's him. Li Yi's pupils shrank slightly. You know him? Mississippi Lu turned around and asked. Li Yi quickly answered. It's the foreign monk just now. He's the one who almost hurt Xiao Huan. This poor monk is here to send you to paradise early. The middle-aged monk was expressionless. Although he still had doubts about the exposure of his tracks, it was no longer important. Holding the iron rod in his hand, he dashed towards Li Yi. Mississippi Lu's eyes flashed. It was enough for her to know that the other party was an enemy and not a friend. Clang! A white light flashed like a waterfall, and her figure instantly disappeared on the spot. Li Yi guarded Xiao Huan behind him, in case there were other monks rushing out from other places. Soon, it was proven that the monk had come alone to deliver his head. Li Yi was not worried about Rui's safety. Although the monk gave him a dangerous feeling, he was probably not as dangerous as Rui. Sure enough, although the iron rod in the monk's hand was powerful, and every swing of it was as heavy as 1,000 caddies, the stone slabs of the stairs would scatter in all directions. However, it could not even touch the corner of Mississippi Lu's clothes. Seeing that she was like a butterfly fluttering in the wind, strolling leisurely amidst the shadows of the staff that filled the sky, the last bit of nervousness in Li Yi's heart disappeared at once. Instead, he was a little envious. He was afraid that he would not be able to reach her state in his lifetime. However, looking at the monk who was like a human flesh destroyer, he could not help but feel a chill. If the iron rod hit him, it would not just be a matter of breaking a few ribs. Deep anger rose in his heart. Was this still a damn monk? If he did not go down the mountain with Rui today, he would not have a good ending. Just for such a small matter, did he have to fight and kill? Madman, this was a king madman. Li Yi did not know that at this moment, the madman in his heart had cold sweat on his bald head. He had originally thought that with his martial arts, it would not take much effort for him to deal with the young man, who did not even have the strength to truss a chicken. However, he did not expect that this woman, who had appeared out of nowhere, would become an insurmountable mountain in front of him. Lu Rui only exchanged a few blows with the monk who blocked her way, and she frowned. Not to say that they were evenly matched. She had thought that she would meet an expert who could catch her eye. However, apart from brute force, this monk had no other skills. He was even far inferior to the old monk named Tan Yin. She was not in the mood to tangle with him anymore. With a thought, the sword in her hand suddenly sped up, and a deep cut appeared on the middle-aged monk's arm. The iron rod also fell from his hand. Knowing that it was impossible to take that person's life today, if she continued to tangle with him, she was afraid that even she would have to die here. The middle-aged monk no longer cared about the iron rod, and with a stamp of his toes, he flew backward and disappeared into the depths of the forest in an instant. Mississippi Lu originally wanted to chase after him, but after looking back at Li Yi and Xiao Huan, she stopped. Damn crazy monk. Encountering a crazy monk, Li Yi's face was slightly gloomy. After going down the mountain, he did not go home first, but directly went to the county government. The capital magistrate had just been banished, and the new capital magistrate had not yet taken office. All the affairs of the county government, big or small, were personally handled by the county magistrate. The current Li Yi was not the same as before. He would not sit on the bench in the county government. As long as it was related to nobility, it would be a big deal. The county magistrate patted his chest and said that he would definitely increase the efforts to thoroughly investigate this matter. The portraits of the monks from the Qi kingdom were also drawn by Li Yi. As long as they submitted them to the Ministry of Justice, they would issue a wanted notice. Within the capital and the surrounding counties, there would no longer be a place for those monks to hide. Uncle Li, these days, asked the guards at home to tighten the patrol and pay special attention to the monks who appear in the village. After returning home, Li specially reminded Uncle Li, "Young master, rest assured. If they dare to come, I will definitely not let them go back." Uncle Li's face flashed with an ominous glint. After saying these harsh words, he immediately went to warn the guards in the manor. Mingzu was right. Those monks without eyebrows and holding iron rods were indeed crazy. Who knew what they would do? Li Yi somewhat regretted asking Rui to let him go just now. This kind of person who hid in the dark and did not know when he would stab you with a knife was the best way to solve the problem once and for all. At this moment, on an official road outside the capital, a horse carriage was speeding at high speed. "I have said that I will give the third prince an explanation for this matter. Why did you act on your own?" Old monk Shi Xian looked at the pale-faced middle-aged monk and said with a frown. At this moment, the middle-aged monk's face was as pale as a piece of paper. His forehead was covered with beads of sweat. The wound on his right arm was wrapped with a white cloth, and blood was continuously seeping out. However, although his face was pale, his expression was rather calm, as if he was not the one who was injured. In the face of old monk Shi Xian's questioning, he did not say a word. After all, we are foreigners. There is no longer a place for us to stay in the capital after assassinating the nobles of the Jing kingdom. We must leave immediately. The old monk said again. Then he sat upright and did not say a word. Chapter 370. Hey, the guard from the Viscount's residence actually came to my house just now. He said that we should pay more attention to strangers around the manor, especially monks. I wonder what's going on? What happened to the monks? Did they offend Lord Ju? In the manor where the Viscount's residence was located, a few villagers squatted on the ground and chatted. He also came to my house. He also came to my house. Another person nodded vigorously and said, the guard from the Viscount's residence said that if anything goes wrong, we should report it to the Viscount's residence in time. If we can provide useful information to Lord Ju, there will be a monetary reward. Someone immediately took over the conversation and said, I came back from the city today. There are notices everywhere in the city for the arrest of a few monks. It might have something to do with this matter. But then again, if any monks really appear in the manor, we have to quickly report to Lord Ju. A monetary reward, how long will it take to earn? A monetary reward was undoubtedly a huge sum of money for these farmers who lived on the land with their backs to the sky. Under the stimulation of the monetary reward, the word monk had become a sensitive point for them. Any bald person would have nowhere to hide under the noses of these farmers. For Li Yi, his home was undoubtedly the safest place in the entire capital. Even the palace could not compare to it. With Rui and Rui personally guarding him, As long as it was not a group of 100 monks with high martial arts skills who came to hunt him down, there was no need to worry about his safety. Moreover, the arrest warrant for those monks had been posted all over the capital. If that monk had a slightly normal IQ, he would have long hidden far away. Li soon stopped thinking about the crazy monk. For the past few days, he had been compiling textbooks at home. First Grade Mathematics, Volume 1. The princesses and princes still had some foundation in mathematics. After understanding and getting used to the usage of Arabic numerals, they could barely skip kindergarten and reach the level of first grade. There were many sets of textbooks that could be used, but none of them could be used directly. Therefore, Li still needed to start from the beginning. He had to recompile the things in the original textbooks in a way that was acceptable to the current people. This included understanding Arabic numerals, comparison of numbers, addition and subtraction within 100, addition and subtraction, and so on. These were all new concepts for the little prince and princess, and it would take them a while to digest. This textbook, which he had added and deleted several times, could be used as an introductory mathematics book for young children. Perhaps in a few years, when the young children of the Jing kingdom memorized the rules for disciples and saw a bunch of strange symbols in the book, they would curse Mr. Li in their hearts. Apart from editing books, he did not neglect his martial arts training. The fact that he had run into a mad monk while he was going up the mountain to pray to Buddha once again proved how dangerous the world he was currently in was. If he did not have the ability to protect himself, he would have to bring Rui or Mississippi Lu with him wherever he went in the future. He practiced the new moves that Mississippi Lu taught him a few more times. When he felt that he had understood most of them, he turned around and realized that Uncle Li had been standing at the door for a long time. "Uncle Li, what's the matter?" Li wet a towel and asked while wiping his sweat. Uncle Li held a gilded invitation in his hand and said, "Young master, the King of Shu just sent an invitation to invite you to a banquet at the King of Shu's mansion in 3 days." "The King of Shu?" Li Yi's hands paused. Uncle Li nodded and said with a smile, "Among the princes, the King of Shu is the one who is most likely to inherit the throne. He likes to make friends with young talents and often holds banquets at his mansion to invite many talents. Everyone in the capital knows about him. Although young master has been conferred the title of the county magistrate of Chang, and by His Majesty, you have no foundation in the capital. You can take this opportunity to get to know the young talents of other families in the capital. If you can make friends with the King of Shu, it will be even more beneficial." Li frowned slightly. He had only met the King of Shu once. They couldn't even be considered as acquaintances. Why did the King of Shu invite him? Moreover, he didn't forget that the King of Shu had a deep grudge with Li Xian. From the bottom of his heart, Li didn't want to attend the banquet at the King of Shu's mansion. However, the identity of the King of Shu was too embarrassing. If he directly rejected the invitation, he would offend the king too much. It was fine in the short term, but if he really became the emperor in the future, he would have the final say in the huge Jing kingdom. How could he continue to stay in the Jing kingdom? Nowadays, Li had long gotten used to the rules of this world. He would no longer act foolishly without considering the consequences. It was obviously not a wise choice to offend the King of Shu. Even if it wasn't for himself, he had to think about the Li family and the Viscount's mansion. Of course, it was also necessary to talk to Li Xian. This invitation, just leave it for now. Even if he attended the banquet, it would be 3 days later. Li had to go to the imperial palace now. This matter could be discussed after he came back. The person accompanying him was Mississippi Lu. Although it would be safer to have Rui accompany him, she was now a viscount's wife. It was not appropriate for her to go out all day. Mississippi Lu didn't have this concern. After Li entered the imperial palace, she wandered around the city alone. After 2 hours, she would pick him up at the entrance of the imperial palace. As usual, he first checked on the princes and princesses' homework. The results were very satisfactory. He didn't know whether they were worried that they would be criticized by the entire imperial palace if they scored 0, or if they really woke up and wanted to study hard in the future. At the very least, all of them could write the numbers taught in the previous lesson. What he needed to do now was to make them forget about counting and get used to this new, simpler, and more convenient method. After the 2-hour lecture, Li left the teaching materials behind and told Shanning to send someone to make a few copies. In the next lecture, he wanted everyone to have a copy. Emingzu was waiting for him outside the hall. The business cooperation between the two families had already been put on the agenda. Other than ruidu and hard liquor, she also had ideas for perfume. She was very satisfied with the samples that Li made last time. That kind of thing that could replace the perfume bag, once it appeared, would definitely be sought after by the daughters of the rich and powerful in the capital. Originally, it was just a business between the two families. After Li Xian found out about it, he insisted on sticking his foot in. Although he had never personally asked about the business of the prince's mansion, he knew that ruidu and hard liquor had created a lot of profit for the prince's mansion. Now, compared to Qing'an Prefecture, the operation of the crown prince's mansion and the expenses for research were not small. This time, he was the first to propose the production of perfume. Li could be worried about the cooperation with the prince's mansion, but he had no such concerns with Li Xian and Emingzu. Oh yes, are you familiar with the king of Shu? Li suddenly thought of something and asked Emingzu. Why are you suddenly asking this? Emingzu turned to look at him. It's nothing much. Today, the king of Shu sent someone to send me an invitation to attend the banquet at the king's mansion in 3 days. Even if he really wanted to attend, he had to find out what kind of person the king of Shu was, his temper, personality, sexual orientation, and so on. Although he had already told him some things about the king of Shu, beauty was in the eye of the beholder, and stupidity was in the eye of the enemy. In view of the grudge between the two of them, he could only believe half of what he said. Emingzu and he were brother and sister and grew up together. It was also a good breakthrough point. Chapter 371. The King of Shu's Invitation? Emingzu hesitated for a moment before saying, Ever since I was young, I haven't had much contact with the King of Shu. However, he has always liked to make friends. Every few days, the King of Shu's mansion will hold a banquet. You are now one of the nobles in the capital city, and are of similar age to him. It's normal for you to receive an invitation. No way. You don't know him that well? Li Yi was a little surprised. Although the old emperor had countless concubines and most of the princes and princesses had the same father but different mothers, they were still siblings with the same blood. Even if they were not from the same mother, they would still have some feelings for each other. Could it be that his thinking had been wrong all along? On second thought, it seemed to be more normal. Princesses were fine, but all princes had the possibility of inheriting the supreme throne after the old emperor passed away. However, there was only one throne. In the end, it depended on each family's ability. A good prince who didn't want to become the emperor wasn't a good prince. Princes would be lucky if they didn't fight for the throne. It was not easy to see touching brotherly love. Given Mingzhu's character, it was unlikely that she would have many close brothers and sisters. She and Li Xian had been friends since they were young. The princes of the same age might have been beaten up by her when they were young. It was normal for them to be a little distant. Emingzi thought for a moment and said, Since he has invited you, there's no harm in going if there's nothing urgent. Even she had said so. Li Yi asked in surprise, Is it really possible for the king of Shu to become the crown prince? No one knows what father is thinking. Emingzi shook her head and said, But from the current situation, the king of Shu has the greatest hope. Putting this aside, it's not good for you to embarrass a prince. It was obvious that Emingzu did not have any prejudice against the king of Shu. At least on the surface, he did not look like an evil person. Li already had an idea. When he passed by the cafeteria, he habitually glanced at a certain corner. Li was startled. Then he turned around and asked Emingzu, What's going on with Princess Yongning? Doesn't she need to go to school? Yongning is different from the other princesses. Father gave her special permission not to go to school. Emingzu paused and said, What happened to Princess Yongning? Why did she become like this? Perhaps it was the feeling of déjà vu that caused Li Yi to involuntarily feel pity for the little princess. At the age of 6 or 7, She should be innocent and full of childlike interest. There was no reason for her to, and she definitely should not, remain in that shadow forever. Her mother died young, and she was seriously ill. This was what he heard from Princess Shining. Emingzu was more than 10 years older than Yongning, and grew up in the palace. She should know more about her. Why did you suddenly ask about Yongning? Emingzu turned around and asked him. I want to see if I can help her. Li Yi said honestly. You have a way? Emingzu looked at him, and a glimmer of light appeared in her eyes. Although she had never interacted with Yongning, she was still her younger sister. How could she not want her to become like a normal child? It's hard to say. I can only try first. Li Yi shook his head and said, all the imperial physicians in the palace, including the famous physicians among the people, had tried to treat Yongning, but none of them had succeeded. If there was someone in this world who could cure her, Emingzu believed that it must be Li Yi. Yongning is the daughter of concubine Liang. Concubine Liang died of an illness when Yongning was 2 years old. Perhaps because she lost her mother at a young age. Yongning's personality has always been rather eccentric. But it wasn't like this. She would occasionally play with princesses and princes of the same age. The reason why she became like this was because of a serious illness a year ago. At that time, Imperial Father summoned all the imperial physicians in the palace. The famous physicians in the capital were also summoned overnight. No one could do anything. They thought that Yongning would die, but they didn't expect that after one night, she would miraculously wake up. Her illness was cured without treatment. Even the imperial physicians found it unbelievable. Emingzu sighed and said, however, although she survived, she seemed to have lost all her memories. Including Imperial Father, she didn't recognize anyone around her. The imperial physicians said that her brain might have been burnt, and there was no hope for her to be cured in this lifetime. From then on, she became even more eccentric. She never spoke to anyone and became like this. Li Yi heard this and frowned. He only knew a bit of modern medical knowledge, and was not a divine physician. He had thought that Princess Yongning was just autistic, but he didn't expect the truth to be like this. If her brain was really burnt and she lost her memory, then things would be much more troublesome. In reality, whether it was amnesia or autism, even in the modern era, there was no particularly effective treatment. Things were much more troublesome than he had imagined. You go first. I'll go back myself in a while, he said to Emingzu and walked to a palace beside the dining hall. On the stone steps in the corner of the palace, the little girl was sitting there. She was still hugging the doll in her arms and staring at the ground with her head lowered. Hello, little girl. We meet again. Li Yi squatted down and smiled as he greeted her. Hearing the voice, the little girl raised her head. When she saw Li Yi, there seemed to be a hint of color in her eyes, but there seemed to be nothing. Li Yi took out the bead and waved it in front of her eyes. He reached out his other hand and said, Thank you for the bead. I really like it. To thank you, how about I treat you to a meal? Looking at the hand that was stretched out in front of her, the little girl was startled. A trace of hesitation appeared on her face. After a long time, she carefully reached out her hand and placed it in Li Yi's palm. Li Yi let out a long sigh in his heart. He had finally taken the first step. Looking at the two figures holding hands and walking into the dining hall, the manager of the dining hall was about to go crazy. Cucumbers, cucumbers, hide those 2 cucumbers well. Don't let him see them. Consort Chen specifically asked for them to be put on her face. Kunlun purple melons, Consort Yan's favorite. They were just delivered this morning and are still fresh. We can't waste them. What are you waiting for? Go. And in that bowl of soup, hide it. It's too late, it's too late. The manager said anxiously and quickly turned around. In this short period of time, his face had already changed into a brilliant smile. He said, This lowly official greets Princess Yongning and Lord Ju. No need. Li Yi waved his hand and pointed at the person who was desperately hiding the cucumbers behind his back. He said, You come here. It's over. Seeing this scene, the manager of the dining hall's heart was bleeding. These were the last 2 cucumbers. Consort Chen, This lowly official has let you down." The manager silently mourned for the 2 cucumbers. Consort Chen's cucumbers were gone, so be it. He couldn't offend this Lord Ju. Of the people who could steal the eldest princess porridge and still stand here, Imperial Consort Chen was one, but that didn't include Consort Chen. Li Yi didn't kill them all. He picked a fresh cucumber, washed it, and broke it in half. He gave the front half to Yong Ning and nibbled on the rest as he pointed at the person in front of him and said, You, where are you looking? Right, I'm talking to you. Stop hiding, bring that eggplant. Kunlun purple melon over. Even Consort Yan's Kunlun purple melon had been destroyed. The manager of the dining hall's expression became even more bitter. The dining hall was responsible for the meals in the palace. Consorts without any status didn't have the power to order them around, much less foreign officials. Other than the imperial family, the only person who could treat the dining hall as his own kitchen was Li Yi. This was because he was not only the mathematics teacher of the many little princes and princesses, but he was also Princess Shanning's cooking teacher and nutritionist in name. This was what the old emperor had said. As long as he didn't tear down the dining hall, the manager couldn't say anything about what he did here. As for complaining to the emperor that this Lord Ju was arrogant and despotic, provoking the resentment of the people of the dining hall, and using public property for his own personal use. Not only did he steal Consort Chen's cucumber, he even stole Consort Yan's purple melon. This kind of behavior was simply not tolerated by the law and would anger both men and gods. The manager really didn't dare. According to Eunuch Wei, the emperor had personally invited this Lord Ju to a meal a few days ago. It was just him and the emperor. Who else in the world could have such an honor? Not even the prime minister. Even if he had 10 more guts, he still wouldn't dare to do this. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.